We've gone live. Hello.
Ooh.
Welcome to Working on a Dime / Beast Fables. I am Brian Tyrrell. I run Dungeons on a Dime. And this is maybe the start of a kind of live cast stream game about animals in a gorgeous animal world. Sort of like Redwall. Joined with me today will be the two players in this game, Ver and Atlanta. Ver, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Ver. I am an artist, and I suppose I can say that. I think you can see that on the stream, but my preferred pronouns are they, them, if that's quite all right. And I am very excited to jump into Beast Fables in both this world building session as well as sessions to come.
And I also am joined by the gorge Atlanta. Atlanta, could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Atlanta. I'm also an artist. I use she, her pronouns. And I am also incredibly excited to start working on this game and talking about what we want to do and things we want to add in and general world building-y thingies, because I am very, very excited to play a campaign where we're all little tiny animals in a massive world, because it's one of my... I don't know, could you call it a genre? I don't know if you could call it a genre, but it's something I like in storytelling.
Yes.
It kind of falls under genre, yeah.
I feel like it's its thing. It is a thing.
Theme?
Yeah,
Sure.
like it's. I don't know if you call maybe not a genre, but it feels like a. I don't know. Here's a type of storytelling that you enjoy specifically because it has animal characters doing particularly non-animal things.
Okay, so I feel like Beast Fables has to be its own subgenre within fantasy because anthropomorphism is a theme. Anthropomorphism is in BoJack Horseman, but it is not the point of BoJack Horseman. But this is specifically like everything is an animal, and the reason why they're animals is to explore human issues through the concept of like animal personas. So Beast Fables is different, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
that would make more sense to me.
But then I'm thinking about settings such as Mouse Guard or Redwall, and even a little bit. Actually, what I was thinking about the other day is if you guys are familiar with the animated series The Rescuers.
Oh my god, yes!
It's a little bit more modern. It's not fantasy or like medieval fantasy-esque as some of these other settings, but it still uses these animal characters who are proportionally sized to the world around them, and working with these makeshift gadgets or ways of dealing with this large world and dealing with very I've watched that movie so long ago. I have this vague recollection that there was a second movie based in Australia where there was like a ranger, not a mouse. I don't remember a lot about the movies, but I just remember that there's these mice who are helping out some like a kid in each movie, a kid who's like orphaned or in trouble, and yeah.
The second
but
one
it feels
actually like it's a good film, because it's on Disney Plus, and I saw it the other day when I was looking for something to watch.
The Rescuers.
The Rescuers, because it's the Rescuers Down Under, because that's what every film set in Australia is called. It's whatever it is Down Under. But like, I think the other kind of rodent character, the Australian guy that they meet up with when they get to Australia, I think he's like, I'm not going to say a jaboa because I don't know if that's quite right, but he's like a jumping mouse.
yeah.
Because he's
No, jaboa.
Like a kangaroo mice.
Jaboa are known for leaping like 10 meters.
Yeah,
They're crazy.
He's something like that because I don't know if he's like a gerbil or a jaboa or a kangaroo mouse or something, but he's something like that. Because I always remember really liking him with his puffy tail. I thought he was really cute. But I love the Rescuers, and that's like, in terms of scale, like that's a really good one to use as kind of an inspiration. You know what I mean? Sorry. No, go on, Beth.
I was just gonna say because I kind of mentioned it off the top of my head, but I couldn't quite place it if it's the movie that I remember, and I did just look up it on Google, and it's The Rescuers Down Under that had the plot with the giant eagle and the kid, and those scenes where the kid is flying with the eagle are just so amazingly animated, because it's so distinctly, there's kind of the human portion and then the animal portion. I wasn't actually sure if it's the same movie because I had distinct memories of these scenes and these characters, but I wasn't 100% sure if they're in the same story, which is different than what we're going for, but kind of the scope of the world is somewhat similar. Like in the first movie, these two main characters fly on a seagull, and the seagull has a little seating area on its back made out of one of those roll off like tuna cans that you that are kind of rectangular, so that they're just like they build elements of this world from
like a seagull upper from Avatar.
I mean, yeah, flying transport that would
No, I'm just imagining like because I'm specifically thinking of that round like large saddle basically that Appa has that lots of people can ride in, but that with like a seagull and then like mice.
Essentially, yeah.
It's
like
that's cool.
The way they built themselves in though is incredibly cute because it's one of those like rolling cans that you roll back to open it. So to seat themselves in properly, they roll the tuna can like up over themselves, and there's like blankets on the inside, so obviously they're exposed to just the air. Like it weirdly, the rescuers, just for maybe not for the fantasy, but just for the aesthetics, I think is really cool because they use human-made things to their own advantage. Like there's a whole scene right at the very beginning in the first film where they have to try and decide who is going to try and save this girl who's been kidnapped, and like they're having like a big meeting in this like to them what would be like a massive meeting room, but to the audience it's like the interior of like a silk lined suitcase, I think. And they're using like just little bits of like egg cups and stuff as like podiums and weird things to sit on and stuff, and I like
sorry, continue, keep saying your thing and then I will jump in.
But like it's aesthetically, I love that they use this whole like here are the human things that we have found that we can use to our advantage, and we've taken and made into our like we're using it for our stuff. Like it just maybe not fantasy like I said, but it just, I don't know, there's something quite sweet and
it's
cute
like
about
finding
that.
a new use for things that you didn't consider before.
Yeah, exactly.
An egg holder can be a podium, or this tuna can, a rollback tuna, a container can be a little saddle of sorts. And
yeah,
I think that's what even in the medieval more kind of fantasy medieval version that we're going for, there's a lot of botanicals or like shells of nuts or shells of various plants that when you look at them you can be like, oh, maybe this is a plate, or maybe this is a cup, or the way that a flower, like petals of a flower, could be used as I'm not sure, like a curtain or something. There's just so many fun ways to reuse these visual elements that we're used to functioning as one thing to be a functional piece. And that's just, I feel like a degree of what's very alluring in like a setting like the Burrowers, or I guess the Ghibli adaptation, for example, with Arrietty, Secret World of Arrietty, I want to say.
Yeah.
Where you see these items reused in such fun ways, and something about that is so alluring. So I don't know what it is, just so very fun and charming. And
so that was what I was gonna bring up, was like the Borrowers, but also there is a really, 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 really cute cooking show on Instagram called Tiny Chef.
Oh my god!
And he's this weird green alien from another planet who landed and decided to start a cooking show. And there are just hundreds and hundreds of these videos that come out every day of him in this tiny kitchen that he's entirely repurposed human things for. So like he has a frying pan that is a bottle cap. And it makes so much sense. Yes, and it's adorable. And his entire kitchen is made out of stuff. He's hand animated. Like a Leica film, if that makes sense. Like
stop motion.
Yeah, stop motion animated. So it's all of it, which is insane that they're putting out stop frame animated content pretty much like at least 2-3 times a week, and they're like good minute-long videos as well.
That's very impressive.
Voiced and foleyed and everything, and it's a freaking cooking show. Also, he speaks this weird alien language, which like I've never been able to figure out, but in theory you can. So he is saying stuff, but he's just speaking it in a weird Tiny Chef dialect.
Oh my god.
I will have to look this up after.
Yeah, so
after this call.
it's insanely cute. I've just been
Definitely.
writing down some of these things. I feel like they're going to be big, like visual cultural touchstones for the game.
Mhm.
So like that feeling of, I really agree with you there on the scale of things and reimagining items, like not changing the scale of the world, just zooming in on a smaller, tinier community portion of it.
Mhm.
I think that's really cute.
I
think there-
had. Oh, sorry.
No, there you go on. Sorry.
Okay. I had mentioned to you, Brian, or sorry, to both of you, that just coinciding with Brian proposing us to play this game, that I'm currently working on I'm illustrating a short comic that's set in a very similar scale and characters. And when because I finished the thumbnails for that, and just as I've been working even on the thumbnails, there's elements of little world building that I've been including already, just to have an idea of what I'm showing in the panel and over the course of the story. And something that I've just had something that just sparked joy was the scale of food. And there's a little panel in this comic where, when I kind of realized that I can do it, I'm just like, oh, where like a strawberry would be very big, and you just slice it like a giant piece of ham.
Oh my god.
And stuff like that, or how a single oh, I forget what they're called in English. The very end of the wheat, that's where the part of the wheat is that you crush into flour. How that would be the size of like a giant fan or something to these
grains?
creatures. And
Oh
the
yeah.
grain, yeah, where the grains themselves could be, if they, because I imagine they bake. But you could just use one of these grains to grind up into an amount of flour that is usable for you.
That was something that I had thought about as well. Not just in terms of like the scale of it, but also like how abundant the world will be full of things for these creatures. So in a way that we're thinking about conservation and the environmental crisis in our world, because we are large creatures in a, I don't know, in a world that we are rapidly outgrowing, how does that translate to, say, like a forest full of creatures where if there's a field of wheat, the mice could feed forever? Like, the scale of their existence is that there is bountiful food out there. They can cut down one bit of wheat. Again, I can't think of it either. Like, chaff is the stuff that comes off when you're shaking out the husks of the wheat. They can cut off one husk at the end of a wheat stalk, and all of the grains in there would give them bread for a week. Like, that's insane. So I think that's a really interesting like theme to bring into this, so that like food is welcome.
Because food for herbivores or omnivores is so plentiful. I guess something to consider is then, you had touched on this, Brian, is the notion of carnivores and what their relation is to these creatures.
So I had a lot of thoughts, but I wanted to save them from when we were talking on stream, because this is a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, you had. But also very quickly, Atlanta, you wanted to. We both wanted to say something, and you told me to go ahead. Do you want to finish that thought that you had?
So I was, because I'm just having a quick read of all of the little things that Brian's writing down, and like I'm glad that you put in the Secret of Nim, because again, there's another very cute aesthetic area just because of Mrs. Brisby's house, which is also, it has a lot of like found stuff in it. Like her table is made of like a piece of driftwood, and like I think her house is actually like a cinder block. Like I think the actual house itself is like a brick that they all live in, which I just think
that's so cute.
It's just so charming. But there's God, what was I going to say? God damn it! Now, of course, my brain is like, you have forgotten.
I mean, the conversation there was. I was going on for a little while.
No.
We moved on to predators or carnivores.
It's really good though, because like I was oh, actually, yeah, another kind of just aesthetic thing, just that I've been thinking about a lot, and this kind of goes slightly back to things like the Rescuers, just because they have those kind of massive, like they have the massive city shots, when they're flying on the back of the seagull. And like one thing I'm really sort of looking forward to exploring is this idea of scale. Particularly because I am going to be playing a small bat character who can fly, if Brian lets me. And like I'm looking forward to that, because there's going to be a lot of the worldview where we kind of really shrink in to look and see how their world works, which I think is going to be really exciting and really fun. But then there's also going to be chances to like scale out again and kind of see things kind of in the opposite extreme, where you have small characters seeing just how huge even their small part of the world is. And I think that's really cool, because like there's a couple of shots in the Rescuers, like in the Secret of Nim. I'm trying to think of other ones off the top of my head that are good for that. Like actually weirdly, like Basil the Great Mouse Detective, the Disney film. The sense of scale works so well because like you're invested in the story and the characters, and you're interested in their plights and things like that, and you kind of you understand their world because it is basically like our world but smaller, and they use like smaller versions of the same things that we would use. But then they also have these amazing moments where like you zoom right out again, and you're like, oh my god, I forgot, like they're tiny, and like their lives and their world is so different to like ours, and like that sense of perspective I think is so interesting and really fun to play with. I think it can be a really good like narrative thing. Oh, okay, Brian.
Oh my god, sorry, just like every single time you guys say something so exciting comes into my brain. That is such a cool idea of like the scale, but also that just reminded me of how gravity and scale and mass is very different. If a mouse falls out of a tree, it'll probably live, even if the mouse is like at the top of the tree. Because ultimately, it is a very light creature, there is a lot of air resistance, and so long as it lands on something soft, it's fine. If a human fell out of an equivalent height of scale, it would splat.
Yes.
So there's this sort of scale of like you're able to go high above the world, and the world is huge, but also the world is in some ways less dangerous.
Oh, definitely.
Like the danger is in different proportions. That is so exciting. But yeah, I really love the zooming in and zooming out. Please keep going.
The danger there though is like, so my little bat character, who is as yet unnamed, please don't come for me, I will name her eventually. She, one of the things that I've been thinking about just specifically for her character is this idea of freedom and adventure, because she's a bat, she can fly. I just think that's kind of fun and kind of interesting. But like, there is an inherent risk of being a small flying creature in a world like this, because you have things like hawks and owls and wildcats and snakes and other things that will eat small creatures like that, without a second thought, which leads on very nicely to the whole predator debate that you are going to bring up, Brian, which I am very excited to hear about, because I've also been thinking about this, because I are we going to have a kind of like Lion King moment where Mufasa sits like, we eat the antelope and then they die and we cut the grass. They're like, okay, that's an interesting way to talk about
the antelope,
We're fine. They die, but we're fine.
But it's fair. It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Laws of nature or something. Simba.
Simba.
Sorry, this reminded me of a really dumb cartoon I saw on YouTube. Have you guys seen
yeah, I think I know that. Simba.
I'm so glad you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, Brian, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting with stupid memes. Carry on.
No, please. Look, I'm just trying to Google what the opposite of nocturnal is. I know it's a word, and I can't find it.
The opposite of nocturnal?
Like nocturnal.
Daywalkers.
No, but it's like diurnal or something like that.
I trust. I just realized you wrote a nocturnal on your Google.
Yeah.
I saw it. Well, maybe just
because it made me think of like
antonym and you'll find it.
Yeah. Well, I did that. I was like, opposite of nocturnal, and I'm getting a bunch of like musician drama because there's a song called Nocturnal and someone's having a faff. So yes, information.
Oh, wait. There we go. What is the opposite of a nocturnal? Diurnal, diurnal.
Yeah.
And also, animals that are active at twilight are crepuscular, which is a word I've never seen.
Crepuscular.
Drepuscular. Crepuscular.
That is so freaking cool. So that just made me think bats. I was like, oh yeah, you can totally fly. And now I'm like, wait a minute. Will you like? If you're playing a bat, what about are you nocturnal? Like, how does the day structure work with animals? This then comes on to predators. So, this influences, because it's such a core pillar of society and how life would be in this world. this really affects how we it affects a lot of different things. So I think some of the arguments. Well, I'll start with an example. So I've been rereading the Redwall books because they're really fantastic. They are like 80% really lovely, upbeat kids stories, 10% gorgeous food descriptions, and 10% like no punches pulled, brutal violence. And
Nice.
it is very interesting as a piece of like media that it is entertaining on like all these different levels, and also a good introduction to like how harsh people can be, but also it's still Beast Fable, very much Beast Fable. And so it seems in this world of Redwall, like they have an afterlife called the Dark Forest, and eventually everything goes to the Dark Forest, but ultimately there's no like idea of God or like worship. There's like a celebration of the seasons, and equally, like predators are a thing. Predators eat creatures. They just do. It's that how they work. And there is this very like almost non-judgmental just acceptance of it. And it's not like the injustice of the hawk fighting and killing the swans, and or animals doing this. It's just sort of like, well, if you get caught by a hawk, you get caught by a hawk. Like hawks have to eat too, and it's very strange. They're sort of more like, because I've been speaking about this off stream with you guys a little bit, but it's kind of like predators are dragons in traditional mythology, where they are both intelligent creatures you can bargain with, they're empathetic and you can side with them, but also they eat people.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting.
I mean, I kind of like it that way, because something that I was thinking about is you, Brian, you want to set this game in a wildlife, much like it would be in Britain, correct?
Yeah, Scotland,
so
sort
the
of like,
animals present, or sorry, Scotland. So the animals present would be the kinds that we have here, and there are not that many predators, all things considered. Because I was thinking how, because I will want to play a toad, and I just had this thought of, if this was in some other place in the world, such as in Florida, for example, I could totally imagine frogs or toads having this vassal state to crocodiles, where
oh
they
my
have
god.
to, for example, amass fish or amass something for them, or else they get eaten. And I could imagine some societies of animals perhaps living in this way, and it kind of harkening back to the idea of some of these predators being much like the idea of dragons, and I do have the strong, especially kind of the D&D dragons, like chromatic dragons, where they're their own thing, and I mean, I guess those are like particularly evil aligned, but that kind of notion of a creature that is very much living in its own world, so to say. It is cunning, it is smart, but you know, dragons don't wear clothes, they don't use swords or anything like that. They are beasts in a way, but they are they're not lowly creatures by any like at all. And I would imagine some predators maybe striking these deals with prey animals of small caliber, where like a bobcat might come to collect fealty from mice, and also how, you know, there was many, the way that many small mammals especially breed a lot, and or many small creatures, I think generally just their longevity is different, or the longevity of their life, therefore they tend to breed in greater numbers. There's more prey than there's predators usually, so you'd have this one bobcat, for example, in a forest that is collecting fealty from the mice, and that's kind of this precarious balance kept between them. So the bobcat just, because if it wanted to, it could just kill everyone, but maybe just for some reason it's just, it likes being worshipped, or it likes being in this position for just whatever, the way that you would assess a dragon being in this position. It's like for whatever dragony reasons, and here would be for whatever carnivorous reasons, where they are a little different in maybe what they perceive as what they want out of life, or what's important to them. But yeah, that's something, because yeah, that's one of these visions, so to say, that I was thinking of for how these things could work in terms of actual contact between the two, where they're not just a force of of nature almost that you can happen to cross upon, because that also makes me think if they are smart, what's stopping them from just coming to the mouse town and eating all the mice?
Yeah,
Actually, we kind of touched on this last week, Brian, when we were streaming, because we talked a little bit about predators, not in any serious depth, but you did make that very interesting point of you know, as an example, because we're setting this in Scotland, and because you mentioned that it could be kind of fun and interesting to maybe set it in like ancient Scotland, so there is, because obviously there aren't many large natural predators left in the UK, if any. I mean, the largest natural predator I think we have would be a badger. But before they were sort of hunted to extinction and things like that, there were bears and lynx and like mountain lions and stuff that lived in the UK. So like, we could always, slightly skew with history in a way and say that like maybe in the time that we are playing in, if we're playing in sort of like in a medieval time, that there could still be things like there could still be bears and stuff, because Brian made this really interesting like kind of like a story idea of like maybe there is a sort of like a mouse kingdom, because we were talking about like how the larger creatures are still sentient, they're still emotional, they're still rational, but they are also like wild, like they are what we would like as a human being you would see akin to as a wild animal. But like the smaller creatures, so things like small rodents and toads and even things like squirrels and stuff, rabbits, like they are what would maybe be considered quote unquote civilized, because they have like little towns and little like slightly more human-esque
when I
things
was
about them.
speaking with Brian, I brought up a term, sapient,
Sapient, that's it, yeah.
I think can describe this discrepancy, so to say, is that where the smaller animals are sapient, or because everything is sentient.
Yes.
Like even I don't know, like an isopod or something is still sentient, but it's not exactly sapient. So it seems like the smaller scale we have for creatures, the smaller ones are sapient, and then the larger ones, well, yeah, because I still imagine them to be. I mean, I still imagine them to be sapient, but
in a different way, though.
yeah,
so this
like
was
the
the
way that a
example.
dragon is sapient and a human is sapient, but their values are entirely different.
This is the example that I was thinking of when combining these two ideas of like the smaller you are, the more sapient you are, but everything is sentient. Is that there's like this capital city of the mice and the rats, and outside the city there's this massive scaffold built into like a rock wall and a tree, built for a bear to walk into it, and then the mice and the rats cover it in armor and do all the straps up like squires, and the bear defends the city in times of war. Like, it's this behemoth, and the bear doesn't need the armor, but the rats are able to sort of like cohabitate and use their sapience to sort of work with this bear, and then outside of war they feed this bear, and the bear lives nearby, and it's like a lineage thing. Yeah.
I like that.
But like
I thought
the bear
when
is
you
able to
mentioned it, I
use
thought it was
those
really cool.
tools. So if they put the armor on the bear's not like, oh, what's this heavy thing? It's like, oh no, thanks to the armor, I'll lean into that when I'm fighting.
Yeah, like I imagine. So whereas the mice, I would imagine, when they're running, they're on all fours, but when they're doing something with tools, they're standing on their hind legs and using their little hands rather deftly. I imagine that the bear, well, bears are obviously capable of of going on their hind legs and using their paws also, but their physical capabilities are very much like a real bear. So this bear can't operate very fine tools. It has claws that are not very good for that, even if it is a creature that generally is comparatively pretty deft when it comes to using its fingers. So I kind of imagine that like these smaller creatures also just have certain physical capabilities where they are just not humanoid in terms of they are a mouse head on a human body, but they have like hands that are capable of using tools much more with more care or more detail, or they have these clothes and stuff like that. And then just the larger animals are much like a larger animal, but can also talk and reason and understand what's what. But they have almost like this, comparatively for all their strength, they still have this physical limitation in terms of they can only really do as much as a as a bear can in our world or a wolf can in our world.
Because I thought it would be kind of interesting, because going back to the predator thing, so like I thought it was an interesting comparison to have like mice and rats helping out a bear, because let's be honest, a bear is not going to be looking to eat mice or rats. You know, they're just too small, and you know, why would a bear bother chasing a mouse through the snow when it could sit in a river and eat salmon? But like, you know, so it's almost like by befriending this bear, they're doing themselves a favor, because they get protection from an animal who wouldn't necessarily have been dangerous to them, but might be a deterrent for other predators.
Yeah.
You know, so like things that would eat mice and rats a lot, which would be things like, you know, foxes and badgers and things like that. I think that's a really interesting kind of like power balance, but also imbalance at the same time. And there could be some interesting conflict in that, with having, you know, these mice and rats using this bear to their advantage, while also maybe unintentionally kind of leaving other animals who aren't part of this community, kind of leaving them in a pretty sorry state, because they are then more likely to get targeted, or you know, they're more likely to get eaten by hawks and stuff. You know, say if we're looking at things like hedgehogs or bats, or or bank voles, like other small rodents, you know, and there could be an interesting sort of, you know, in adding detail, there could be an interesting conflict that arises from doing this, where the mice and rats are sort of getting a little bit too big for their britches, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, that does set precedence for the politics in this world.
It does, because they have this ultimate sort of protection in a way from this huge bear, who kind of, you know, is a sort of I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine type of deal. So like they are both getting something out of it, but then you have the people who are going to suffer because of this deal, you know.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I know that you know, sort of mice and rats and stuff are also predominantly sort of nocturnal animals, like bats. Same with like hedgehogs and stuff, but you know, things like shrews and bank voles are not particularly nocturnal. Like they are small rodent creatures, but they are also very active during the daytime. You know, they would feel the effects of that much more acutely, because they are going to be like, they won't have this kind of protection. And I don't know, that is kind of leading in from like how predators are kind of becoming a kind of political part of this world as well. And I think that's really cool, because it could make for some really interesting story beats. You know, if our characters were to say like come across the city and go in, and they see the bear, and they see how, like, I mean, maybe their communities, as a result of this agreement between these mice and rats, is like their communities have been suffering because, like, well, we've like more and more bats recently have been being eaten by hawks and owls and foxes and stuff, because they can't get to the mice. They can't get to the mice or the rats, because they're protected by a huge predator that would definitely kill a fox or a badger, you know.
I'm also, I mean, that kind of makes me think of when you have creatures, how, you know, these little creatures that these mice have this bear. And it's probably the only bear in a quite a, especially for these small creatures, a very big terrain. Because if I remember correctly, bears are solitary creatures unless it's like a mother with baby bears.
Yeah.
And with that kind of centralized power of the mice, then that makes me think, if there's a pack of wolves somewhere, how maybe they are trying to get, like, there could be creatures that want to solicit them, but I imagine it would be larger creatures like otters or badgers who want to work with them, or like weasels and foxes, kind of, maybe. Do you have some dealings as well, because they have these like common enemies in terms of the mice kingdom and whatnot, and how just that forgive me for the fun, bear precedent large this kingdom that has this bear, I think can influence so many dynamics in like the forest, like quote, you know, capital T capital F, or the terrain that all of this story can encompass. and I don't know, I like that a lot because I already have like almost these cascading impressions of how things could work because of it. And I'm also thinking that a very lovely benefit that the bear could enjoy from mice is that they can tend to berry bushes or fruit bushes, and also to beehives. So instead of the bear coming in and just destroying a beehive, they pay fealty in honey by basically being bee farmers. And so these bees are the size of like a pug, right, for a mouse.
Oh my god!
Oh my god, yes.
And they are like because another thing, okay, so this is something that I just mentioned, and I imagine just as a truth, but I obviously don't know if you guys agree that bugs are not sapient, neither are fish.
No.
So I was going to say this is a point that I had like 15 minutes ago, but this conversation has been so exciting. Fish in fish in Redwall are not sentient. It's not explicitly stated, but all animals eat fish, or like all creatures that would eat fish do eat fish. They go fishing, they live in the water, and it extends to aquatic creatures. So, for example, like a crab comes out and tries to attack the mice when they're on the beach, but the crab doesn't speak. The crab doesn't have like that intelligence, like a bandit trying to rob them. It's a non-sentient creature, which is very interesting.
It's a beast. Yeah, I do like, because I imagine amphibians, and I mean, I have to imagine because I want to play a toad. I imagine amphibians, and also reptiles, serpents, lizards, salamanders, those are amphibians. Frogs, toads are still on that scale of creatures that have sapience culture, and they're like toads and frogs and lizards, salamanders are still in that small bracket of mice. Like, we have our own stuff going on. But
what if they're like dinosaurs?
Fish? What?
What if they're like dinosaurs? Fish. Like, they're cunning, but they don't have that sentience.
Have you seen a fish?
No. Well, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm not just talking about like guppies. I'm talking about like sharks. I'm like, where do we draw the line of water? Sharks and dolphins and those sorts of things.
Well, a dolphin is a mammal, so I imagine dolphins are like mystical giant, just super mermaid creatures essentially.
But they're also massive dickheads. So
they can be, yeah. But
they're the fae creatures.
Dealing with dolphins.
I don't think you're gonna find a dolphin in a Scottish river. Let's be real.
I mean, I imagine the kind of fish that you'd find in rivers are just they're beasts. And a single fish is obviously also, it's not an easy thing to take down, but it would be kind of like
they use it as a war beast. So some weasels are chasing some otters, and the otters dive into their little underwater burrow, and then they release a pike on the weasels that they have trapped.
Yeah.
And that's like, and they're like, oh, it's all stumpy, and then this like nasty ass pike with like a wrecked up fin just slithers out and tries to bite the otters, but the otters are like, nah, go eat the weasels, and the weasels are like, nah, oh god, and then there's just like this very short, sharp scene of the pike just like destroying these weasels. Yeah. Very, very bloody.
Like the release the pike would be very much like this is maybe this creature. Oh man, I just imagine it's like scarred or has like fish hooks in it or something from just being just this beast of burden where it knows not to attack the otters because it'll get hurt. And it is just set upon. It's like as if, I don't know, someone in some fantasy game would have like a giant dire tiger that they release upon their enemies, and the tiger is just in some way, just because of conditioning, knows not to attack the people in this particular armor and goes for these things in front of it. I imagine fish being on that level.
Okay, so this is the next question that follows up from that. If fish aren't sentient, how is it a problematic, or even like bugs, like where do we draw the line at sentience, and then is it problematic where we draw that line? are we continuing like analogies of like animal cruelty and like circuses and you know fighting pit dogs and stuff like that? Like how I'm not saying we are or that it's bad what we're doing. I'm just curious. Like, what does this mean as a greater context?
I don't like the idea of any degree of animal cruelty, but just on the surface level of this fantasy setting and release the pike and you just have this old scarred pike that's like, oh, I'm gonna eat these weasels. Something about that, I'm just like, that is really just, that is baller, that is gnarly.
It's very cool.
And though obviously like I would never want to see a creature harmed IRL, but for the sake of just the aesthetic and kind of the feeling of this world does have this harshness to it, I like that narrative notion of these creatures just being the beasts to these animals, so to say. And with bugs, I imagine the my toad. He comes from like a little not a kingdom, but just a little what would you call it, like a keep or something of toads. And they have they farm slugs to eat the way that you would have just animal husbandry and keeping pigs or keeping cows. They breed slugs specifically because that's something they eat, so they don't have to hunt slugs out in the wild. But I also imagine that a pillbug is a popular pet, or stag beetles or like giant beetles are used as mounts.
Oh my god, yes.
Or like a giant. Well, actually, dragonflies wouldn't be big enough to carry like a mouse or something. But maybe butterflies are kept as a beautiful pet, as something, a very rare butterfly, for example, a migratory species, is a indicator of status and prestige.
Maybe they're like flowers, because you get flowers for people and they only open at certain times and then they die. Like, it's the same with butterflies. Maybe they have butterflies.
Oh, you give people a chrysalis?
Yeah, and then it blooms and you've got this beautiful butterfly and then you let it go and oh, it's so beautiful. You enjoy its presence and then you let it out into the world and it does its butterfly thing.
Yeah.
You have like chrysalis farmers who are just like, they have an entire tree stump full of these butterflies or these caterpillars, and they specifically try to like not harvest them but guide them into these spaces so they can crystallize and then get them to safe spaces where they can hatch.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine maybe they're like this could be a what are they called? Like luxury items. Maybe there is a family of shrews who did an entire expedition to go somewhere to mainland Europe or whatever, and just bring back a species of butterfly that is not endemic, I think? No, that isn't native to Scotland. And this is like, this is
story thread.
Amazing.
We could also have something like that with like, we could also have something like that with like, you know how we have like migratory birds that come to the UK, so like in the sort of spring and the summer we have like swallows and house martins and swifts that all come up from like their huge exodus from like Africa.
Merchants.
Yeah, like traveling seasonal merchants who are only here for the spring and the summer, and they also bring exotic, food and livestock and like crafts and things from like other small native creatures from like Africa or like from Europe. So maybe we do have like opening up this sort of whole idea of like maybe there is like a kind of global trade system. Maybe there is like, maybe we trade them honey from the bees that we have in the UK and they give us other fine things from other places, you know what I mean? Because then like it sort of, it makes it a little bit more global, makes it a little bit more open, but it also I don't know, that's kind of cool to me. I love the idea of like all the swallows and the swifts and the house martins all arriving with like their stuff from their native lands, with their cargo basically. Like how do they do that? How do they do they have to employ bigger birds to be able to help them fly all this stuff?
Oh my god, pelicans is like U-Haul.
Like massive seafaring birds like albatross that wouldn't eat things like they wouldn't eat sort of small rodents, so like they would be quote unquote trustworthy. you could have like, oh, I don't know. I think that's a little. I
love
think that's really
that.
cool.
No, I love that, and yeah, being able to trade these, because I suppose it would mostly be tokens of luxury. It could be things like, I mean, this is feeding a little bit into real life history, but hopefully with not such a drastic historical fallout. But things like spices
Oh
or
yeah.
herbs, or apart from just maybe these rare chrysalis or flowers. Oh, you know what I bet would be like a huge token of prestige would be if you bring seeds to Scotland, for example, from faraway places.
Ooh.
They won't grow, but you can bring saplings that are maybe treated in such a right way where they will grow and bloom or have fruit just for that one season, because afterwards they can't survive. But it would just be like a huge thing where the the Duchess of the Old Forest has a
Orange.
well, I don't think they could grow an orange tree, but like an orchid, or has a or just something like that, where it's just this. Some of them are practical in terms of like maybe being a small bush of fruit, but some of them are just vain in terms of they are
Something that
something artistic, cultural, or like beautiful looking, but it will pass. But it's just like an indicator of status because you can afford that.
So something that an idea I had a little bit ago, was like a story thread where invasive species, these animals, the birds don't know, what will happen when these plants grow in Scotland because they don't live there. So like a whole campaign could be like bringing Japanese knotweed to Scotland, and then it just completely taking over a forest and destroying the ecosystem, and all of the animals having to band together to deal with it.
Or like rhododendron, which are also
or
like
rhubarb.
they're beautiful. Or rhubarb, yeah, like invasive species. Though rhododendrons are like massive tree killers, because they can take up competitive space for roots and stuff like that. That's a really that's an interesting notion, actually. It's like this idea of like extending a sort of what would be perceived as a gift, but in actuality could be to the serious detriment of a local ecosystem. A curse. But that's also going back a little bit to what you guys were just saying. Is like there's also some interesting stuff that we could play in here with things like hierarchy, because obviously like we mentioned with the whole animal cruelty thing, like we don't want to perpetuate sort of gross stereotypes and stuff like that, and like but I suppose kind of in the same way, it's probably, in my opinion, we acknowledge that these things are and have been, and that they change, and like we're not going to talk about like the grossest parts of them in the stories, but like, and the same could go for things like hierarchy and monarchies and stuff like that. But to be fair, they do make for very interesting story beats with the power imbalance, which could be, like if we're going back to like way old Scottish history, like all the different kings of Scotland, like who were all like there were multiple kings because there were like the world was a lot bigger back then, and everyone had their own sort of small territory, and there was unity, but there was also a lot of infighting for power and resources and stuff like that when times got hard. And like that, those are always very interesting story beats, which again kind of goes back to the whole mice thing. Like maybe because the mice and rats have got such a sort of this huge city with this huge denizen of a bear, like maybe
it's also
maybe all these traders want to go directly there first before going to some of the other counties and not trading with them, and so like the mice and the rats are still getting an unfair advantage. Sorry, Brian.
I was just gonna piggyback and say that by having these systems and being aware of the problems that can be within them, we're not inherently ignoring them, and that can be fun. So for example, I keep going back to Redwall because I'm reading it right now, but like there is these forest cats who have a keep and are basically sort of like the enforced kings. And essentially there's a general, they say that they've got the forest creatures enslaved, but once the forest creatures start to get annoyed enough by the increasing levels of taxes, they just leave. And there's this sort of, because the world is so big, and there is, because cycling back to the idea of like plentiful food, ultimately, to some degree, there is the ability to pick up and leave and move on. And these power structures that exist are there because to some degree all of the creatures agree to live like that. but ultimately they always could split up. So like if the bear is getting a bad deal, it's not like, oh, there's an abuse going on with this bear. Either it's a fun story to explore like this specific bear and abuse, or if it's not a story that we want to explore, then the bear would just move on. And that can be a consequence. And the bear, the bear doesn't get any honey anymore, and the bear just leaves, and that then changes this whole power dynamic.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, because but we've expressed concern in terms of showing certain hierarchies and power dynamics, and once again, kind of going back to the notion of the beast equivalents in this world and how they're treated. I think it's all just because I was thinking of like, why is it cool in the story, but I obviously don't like it in real life. It's sort of how like in stories, I like stories that have sometimes very violent battles in them, like people just swinging swords and blood going everywhere, and it's just very not like horrendously gory, but just quite visceral. But I would probably faint if I saw someone even somewhat cut in real life. And there's just that degree of fantasy where some things are just cool because they're in this fictional space and we're exploring it. It's just like, the main character swinging around a huge sword and just mowing people down. And I think, yeah, the things like these power structures, like, this kingdom of mice who have this mighty bear at their behest, or these otters have this war-scarred pike that they can set upon their enemies. It's just like, yeah, and this story is cool. It's cool. It's a big one. But I also don't want to go into like, the pike's tortured every day. I don't want to.
Yeah, this is what I mean. Like, ultimately, we all get to consensually agree that like, if we want to look into the idea of like a creature in captivity being tortured and us being, say, heroes that are setting it free or challenging that power dynamic, then we could go down that route. But ultimately, we could also say, no, that's not a cool story. We don't condone that in real life. Let's just keep it surface level. Otters have a pike. The pike is there with the otters, and we're going to leave that somewhat like ambiguous with the assumption that it's generally in good faith. Like the pike could bust its way out and escape if it really wanted to, because ultimately it's getting food.
Regular scritches and snacks.
Yeah.
And the otters they call him Ol Mike. Ol Mike protecting our river. And
Ol Mike the pike.
Much better because Ol Mike the pike is kind of stupid, but man, he loves chin scritches and gets little fish as treats if he's not being set out into the fields.
So that's what I mean. Like we can have that assumption of like a general if it ain't broke, it isn't broke. Does that make sense?
If it ain't broke, it isn't broke.
Yeah, and if we're exploring it, we can make it broke because that can make for a cool, interesting story with complicated, morally grey areas, but it doesn't have to be like everything is gross all the time forever.
Yeah, because, there is stuff that, like, if we want to, we can touch on, I guess, just because maybe it's just something that we agree, like, this could be interesting, but we need to acknowledge it in like a sort of in like a healthy way. But like, I like the idea of the otters having a massive fucking pike that
oh my god, me
kind
too.
of does their bidding. But maybe more like the way that you would like how do I explain? Like the way that you would like train a horse or like something like that. Like it's a large animal that could most certainly hurt and attack you if you piss it off. But like when treated with kindness and consideration and whatever, like it becomes a valuable asset to you, and it will remain a valuable asset to you as long as you are still good and kind to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unlike circus animals that so often like turn on their trainers because they're like, you like beat and shout at me all the time, and eventually the animal will snap and like bite people and kill people because of course it will.
Yeah.
Oh,
I guess it's that thing where if you really want to, you can always kind of go in bad faith things.
Oh yeah.
Because also just as you were saying this, Atlanta, I just had that thought of like, yeah, if you really want to, you can just make Pokemon really, really miserable because it's like, it's like dog fighting. Right? If you really, really want to, you can just make it all very bad. But when I'm enjoying the games, I'm enjoying them for these reasons that it's a fun game, and I don't really think about like the game wouldn't work if it was all just like, it's actually cruel and illegal. and it said like, "Oh, the Pokemon like fighting." It's like, yeah, sure. I mean, no,
sorry,
like,
sorry.
yeah.
That was who? Yeah, sorry.
That did sound a little, yeah, that did sound kind of like I'm doubting it, but no, it is just, it is just what it is, and I feel like we can just assume going into things. Things are the way that they are, and if we want to go in further and be like, this is bad, it's gonna be bad, but also we don't have to question it, and we just assume, we just good faith it.
So like
Yeah, exactly.
sometimes it's just like an evil queen and her evil army, and we just got to fight those weasels on patrol. And sometimes it's like, oh, maybe these weasels are living under oppression too, if we're exploring this whole queen thing. Other times it's just like, oh yeah, evil queen, don't like it, move on, don't think about it,
Yeah.
out of sight, out of mind. Yeah.
Well, because like I mean, there would always be the you know, like because we're sort of working with things like beast fables and stuff like that, there was always the notion of like, oh, so which animals are we going to put like as quote unquote the bad animals? You know, because like so often in literature, particularly in things like children's literature, the ones and like it, and you know, Redwall is a good example of this. The worst animals tend to be predominantly within the same kind of families. It's usually things like rats and weasels and stoats. And then you have things like in the Secret of Nim, and also in like in Redwall as well. Like, you know, you have like the giant owls who are like these huge wise creatures and stuff, which I still like aesthetically, but like they're also kind of terrifying because obviously they will eat smaller creatures. And then you have like, I think, what's the snake called in Redwall? It's called Asmodeus, the massive snake, who's like
All I'm thinking of is Asmodeus, Amadeus. Yeah. No. Yeah.
You know,
That
so
dude.
like even if we just avoided falling into that pitfall of like, oh, they're weasels and they're evil because they're weasels, like you know, like even that is like, in terms of just a story, is already like a huge step in the right direction, in my opinion. Just because like we're not sort of falling into the same trap of like, oh well, because of other sort of sources, we're going to say that these creatures are bad. Which is why I like the idea of the whole sort of the rats and the mice with the Bear Kingdom storyline, because like mice are so often shown as to be, you know, like, I mean, they are so often used as protagonists in so many beast fables, like even to some of the ones that we've already mentioned, but like, you know, in Redwall, The Secret of Nim, Tale of Despero, like all of these, Mouseguard, like all of these are like, oh, mice are so sweet and lovely, but like, you know,
Oh yeah.
also like maybe kind of conniving, maybe a little bit devious, who knows, like, you know, I am looking forward to using beast fables in the way that they are traditionally used, so like having a look at like using these animals as a sort of what's the word I'm looking for, as like a stand-in for sort of humans and personalities and stuff, but like, you know, but playing on the good and bad for like all of the animals. So like I'm looking forward to seeing
their
like
choices and their choices are what sets them
Yeah.
in certain in light, in certain light, rather than, you know, just what they are. Like, yeah, the weasels are evil because, I mean, look at them, look at
Yeah,
them.
exactly. They look evil. It's like, well, that's just sort of stereotyping then in that case. Like, because you know, bats could be seen in an unfriendly light because they are predominantly nocturnal. You know, they sort of are like, they live in little colonies, but they're sort of quite solitary. You know, they don't. Maybe there are issues where like they don't mix particularly well with other animals because of reasons that the bats have decided or something. Like, you know, there are ways to kind of play all this stuff, and I really like that. You know.
Yeah.
Sorry. Right.
Because the way I was thinking, because I very quickly looked up just predators of toads. And by the way, hedgehogs, stoats, weasels, rats, and corvids, which I think are some of the sapient species in this setting,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting. But there's also because toads, they secrete like a toxin to deter predators, and then even if they eat them, the predators are just like, oh, this tastes really bad anyway, it was not worth it. And I imagine actually that toads, because they're also amphibious creatures, and they can seek safety in the water in a way that land animals perhaps cannot. So I kind of imagine that the toads live in their little keeps, or I'm not sure what to call them, or like maybe even kingdoms, but it's not like they have
Log
fields in.
burrows?
What's this?
Log burrows?
Well, see, I actually imagine that, yeah, it's either a log or like a hollowed out
Tree stump.
tree stump where there's like the fortress or something, and
Stump
it's
keep.
always adjacent to a lake and some areas where they keep their bugs and stuff, and they just have these little remote worlds because they're entirely self-sufficient in terms of they have their slug farms, they have their water. If they can't defend the or like even maybe parts of these hollowed trees, when you go inside, some of them are submerged in water at the bottom, so they have access to the lake from the fort. And basically, they're not the things that they have and what they eat are not really desirable for other quote unquote powers that be. Like the mice don't really want access to these slugs because that's nasty. And predators don't attack them because they're not tasty, and also they can just hide underwater and it's not really worth it. And they just live in their own secluded worlds, and they're not very aware of how things are for some of the other species. And they're kind of shut off and isolated in that way. And it's not like they're just sitting there like, those mice are all foolish or something. They just don't know. And they don't get it, and it's just like, oh, you have a giant bear. Oh, that's really cool. And they don't consider it further than that. And like I had this idea that my toad character is very much I mentioned it in the chat before, that I imagine that the disposition of the toads is somewhere between Lord of the Rings, dwarves and hobbits.
Yes.
Where they're these jovial people who are entirely like, much like hobbits, they're kind of self-sufficient. They love to revel and to eat. But also that degree of this stereotypical Lord of the Rings dwarf that I envisioned for them is that they're very honorable and loyal and very like, have at thee, knave! And like if they're a companion, they're extremely protective, and they also strive for good in this very idyllic way, because they probably would like everyone to live like them, but they also don't understand the nuance of these political ties and societies that some of the other prey animals are subject to.
Yeah.
So I imagine that this toad character, he's from a noble family, and he's like, yes, he was trained in battle. He's never been to a real battle. But he's still very like, he's very ignorant of the ways of the outside, but he's still very good and generous and wanting the best. He just doesn't understand not like the grayness of the world. It's not that everything's black and white to him, but just given how the toads live, he just does not have the idea of everything else out in the world. So his interactions with the world, especially if we're going into maybe this mice city or dealing with some of the other predators, is just fish out of water. And maybe that's also why some other animals would look down on toads, because it's like, well, they're just, they're not participating. They don't want to form allegiances. They don't want to do anything. They don't care for what's going on out here. And toads are just like, but why would you worry when there's plentiful slugs?
So maybe there's these like social stereotypes in the same way that we have those in real life. So, like, we could have the social stereotype, for example, weasels are evil, but actual weasels, it's not like a hard game ruled fact, weasels are evil, it's this is the stereotype because this. Or it could be toads are selfish because they live in these self-isolated communities. Are they actually selfish? Well, that is a whole conversation to have, and that is really interesting.
Well, I feel it's probably maybe more than the species, it's just so you could have weasel societies that work with the mice, and for example, because they get to benefit from the bear, and they're like, well, the foxes won't get us. But then you might have weasel societies that are entirely isolated. They're doing their own thing. Sometimes they might attack stray travelers because they're predators. That's how it goes. And maybe you have weasels who work with foxes because they're like, foxes, if we strike a deal with you, you won't attack us, but we'll help you hunt. And then it's just like, no, that the redback weasels are the ones that are isolated. It's known that the black striped weasels are the ones that work with the mice, and the bluefoot weasels are the ones that work with foxes. Actually, redback would probably be better for foxes now that I think about it. But I was just saying, like, weird, like, physical, like, oh, these guys have stripes, or these guys put, I don't know, have access to, like, some kind of blue muddy chalk that they walk around in, and that's why they're called bluefoots, or something like that. So it's just known that these groups are like that, and
There's
maybe
so much that we could play with though, with like all of the different animals and like all of their different like little societies and stuff. Because like I've been thinking about kind of the same thing for like how do the bats fit into like this world? Like what would their roles be? And like there's a lot of things that they could be doing, like you know, kind of insect handling in a way, because you know the tops of trees are gonna get lots of aphids, so like baby insects. Like so like farmers in that way, like is that a useful thing? But also things like messengers, because they can fly. And like you know it could like maybe that's seen as like a very skilled profession, because like it could be quite dangerous. There are like plenty of things out there that will kill bats for flying around, particularly at night. And like you know, so maybe in a different way, maybe bats are kind of like, people are like, oh well, bats are great and they're wonderful and they're so trustworthy, when like but there could also be like massive factions within different bat societies. Maybe they don't want to be messengers all the time. Maybe they don't want. Yes. You know, and like maybe like they're like, well, we keep sending messages for all these other animals, but like we send good bats out all the time and they end up getting eaten a lot, and like the mouse kingdom with their bear, and we have no protection and it's not fair and stuff like that. Like you know, more political strife, that kind of stuff.
I like that.
There's there's so many different thoughts I've had since everything you guys have just said. So first of all, just the single scene image of like a big hawk like swinging down and chewing up a toad, and there's another toad like, oh my god, no, and then they spit the toad out half mangled, and it's just like, oh, your friend tastes gross, and then flies off.
Oh my god.
Like horrifying. In the same way that just a dragon swooping down on two peasants, she goes, nom nom, you don't bathe, and then just moves on. Like, that is a real mood for like the world and the relationship between like these larger predator sentient creatures and these more sapient smaller creatures.
Yeah. Well, see, I feel because the larger predators, for example, are they're smarter than the predators in our world, and they probably communicate between each other, which creatures do to some extent, but not all. So I actually imagine that the notion that you just don't eat frogs because they're nasty and they're slightly poisonous is just common knowledge now among any creature that is in a place with toads, because they would just communicate that between each other, and like and just further that knowledge, which might further work towards that isolationist kind of, we're in our own little world of toads, which I think actually, now that I think about it, is actually an incredible strength that they have about over other creatures, because they don't need to vie for the protection of a bear or other predators.
Oh, they have that natural advantage. That
but also,
that's really interesting.
well, we say that, but also not having done any research about Scottish creatures, like they could also face massive devastation and have no one to turn to, which is an interesting narrative in itself, when some kind of water predator comes along and completely bypasses those defenses. Maybe like an otter or a beaver or some kind of creature that's just like, oh, I'll just chew through this log. Nom. And it changes things. Or equally, alliances. Like the beavers might not eat the frogs, but the foxes working with the beavers will.
Oh, like a sort of quid pro quo type deal.
You
like,
get the log, we get the frog.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Campaign.
Well, so because actually that's another interesting thing, because it is, from what I understand, it is toads that have the specific toxin. Frogs don't. So I wonder if frogs often vie for protection from toads.
Oh my god, do the toads like work up a sweat and then like bottle the sweat and sell it to frogs?
Oh. I mean, maybe like frog toxin is, or sorry, toad toxin is something that like frogs can cover themselves in, and to deter predators or something. I don't know. Or maybe just oh man, what if the frogs are just like, I'm just gonna draw a bunch of spots on me to look like a toad?
Oh my god! Disguise kit! This is getting away from the big question I want to ask, which is laws. how do we? What is law in a land where you have predators that regularly eat prey? Because it's specifically from the idea of like murder. Are we looking at justice in a sense of individual case by case? Is it just sort of like you have judges, but the judges are like, oh yeah, hawks eat mice, like no question? Or is it a greater sense of duty, like damage to society and collection? So it's not you've eaten a bat, it's you ate a guild messenger and they carry messages even for you, so you're bad. Like, where do we have? Ooh, it's just a big question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine the degree of not policing the laws, but there's rules and regulations the way that societies or organizations have, such as you can be like, I like this idea of these guilds, right? So it's like, oh, there's this guild among the bats who are messengers, and if someone is performing messenger duties with reduced prices, the guild will be after them because that's bad for business.
Yeah.
But if a hawk kills a bat, they're not suing the hawk because the hawk will not appear in court and might actually call its other hawk buddies because it's just like, maybe it's just so indignant that someone would go for it. I imagine the notion of injustice coming from these larger predators is more a matter of the world. It's just they are almost treated like a force of nature. It is something that will happen. If, for example, you have the weasels that are working with the mice, and one of the weasels does something to a creature, to a mouse, then it is subject to whatever due justice among these two societies because they work together. But if a weasel from the faction that works with foxes kills a mice, it's like, well, yeah, because that's the guys who work with the foxes. They're gonna kill mice. We're not gonna sue them. The foxes don't care. The weasels don't care.
I feel like it could come down a lot to whether or not something like that is kind of organized, I guess, would be the phrase I would use. So like, for example, if we talk about there and the little toad kingdoms and everything, like if there was a say there was like a natural disaster, like maybe there is a beaver dam upriver that breaks because of a large rainfall, it comes down and it just washes away like a huge like a massive load of the toad, either the territory or the defenses, and then like dangerous fish come in, so like wild pike, untrained pike, they come in and they eat a bunch of the toads. Like, that's not really anybody's fault, even if they could say like, well, you know, the beaver should have made a better dam, the toad shouldn't have built a kingdom there. Like, that's like a natural disaster. Like, stuff happens and things are bad.
I do imagine. Oh, sorry. I'll follow up after you're done. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I want to hear what you're gonna say if you're laughing. But like, you know, but say, so for example, in another iteration, say, you know, say that there are a group of foxes who are specifically targeting toads because they don't like how rich their kingdom is, or like maybe there is a specific reason that they don't want them around anymore. So they are the ones that break the dam and wash away the kingdom, and like they are the ones that go in and maybe don't eat but kill a bunch of the toads necessarily. Like, that would be a kind of thing where like, yes, they are like, I don't know where we're going to have the cutoff for like how big animals get before they become the kind of like the wild, like the massive wild creatures like bears. But like, you know, maybe like that's where things kind of get a little bit dicey. So again, if you go in and use like the bats as an example, so yes, you have bats who go out and send are like sort of messengers for everybody because they're fast and they're nimble and they can fly through the night, etc. If one gets eaten by a hawk on duty, that's not the hawk's fault. That's force of nature. That's just stuff that happens. But again, maybe maybe hawks are specifically targeting messenger bats at the moment, and like, yeah, you're not going to get a hawk to come in, sit in court and be like tried or anything, but maybe that's when you have a kind of retaliation force of like, right, this particular hawk has overstepped its boundaries and we are now going to enact some sort of defensive strategy to either drive the hawk away or kill it because it's targeting specific bat messengers.
It becomes a like it is specifically, it would kind of be that thing in D&D, a subquest where this I don't know, elemental bears attacking the trade route from this and this town. Kill it, because it's prohibiting us in being a society, and even if it's not, and maybe it's doing it maliciously, or maybe it's doing because it has a reason, people disrespected it, whatever. But yeah, I can imagine that being a thing. And because earlier you were saying how the beavers break the dam overflows, the toads are flooded, things are bad. The toads would be like, alas, and try and do something about it. If foxes break the dam, the toads are going to war.
Yeah.
The toads are just like, oh,
How about you?
how about you foxes? And well, they go to the beavers and say the foxes have disrespected our
Us.
fine river, and just like, haha, we shall defeat the foxes, and probably most of the toads like just
You know what this is
probably
sounding
die
like?
from that, but they're 100% just like, we're going to war.
This sounds like individual communities are countries. Like France goes to war with England. The Toad community of East Bank Pool goes to war with the foxes of the Red Trees. Like it's individual self-governing societies, and they can merge and they can intertwine. So you can have like the traders, the birds that fly in bearing all these different seeds. They're like neutral, what's the word, city-states. They're like, oh yeah, we've got the conglomerate of South Flyers, and we have seeds, and we don't care who pays us, because we don't live in this forest. We just come here like once a week, a year. Like that's it. And
but also by extension, it could be that this particular family of shrews has struck a deal with them that they only sell to them.
And then it's up like to the shrews to kind of exact justice. If the traders to like turn their backs on them, or like have been going behind the shrews' back and trading, then it's up the shrews to get their own idea of justice from these trader birds. And that might in turn upset other societies. Yeah, it's more complex. It's not like there is one law and one rule. It's justice is very, very case by case, and also society by society.
Yeah, and I do imagine that societies are for the most part either one species or a few species coexisting. So the mice and rat society of the mouse kingdom, quote unquote, would also probably encompass many other creatures coming in to live in the city, either individually, as but it could be there's also populations of shrews there. There is some weasels there.
Out traders, not even traders, but like residents of the forest come to the big capital city, and they're all part of this larger society. And they know that if they kill each other, that there's a neutral zone. If they kill each other in the city, they're all responsible, or like they will be individually held responsible for that. But equally, like if a fox eats a rat in the middle of the forest, that's a separate level. That's a different tier. That's a you knew what was going to happen.
Like so like that's I like that kind of these areas where it gets grey, because then you like there are some very interesting stories. Like, so again, I'm sorry, I'm gonna use the bat example because like I'm
go for it.
Like because I'm very excited to play my bat.
Yes.
But like say my little character, say that she starts out as a messenger, and like maybe there is a story in there of like she's doing her job, she's delivering her messages, and everything is fine, but like more and more bats are being attacked like on the daily, and like less and less of them are surviving, and like that's weird, because of course there's going to be like there is a danger, there's an inherent danger of being a small flying mammal around at night when you live in a forest, and there are owls and hawks and other things that will grab you. But like like there could be some really interesting story beats for a lot of the smaller animals, where like more and more of us are getting into trouble, and like less and less of us are surviving, and we're having to look for other protections and stuff like that. But it's also how we supposed to get that when there are so few of us, and like I don't know, I think this cool story shit in there when you have like where it feels like, okay, where is the line now between usual levels of danger and then like we are being targeted by this specific group of predators, or maybe it isn't even predators, maybe it is predators being told, if you do this we will give you that, by other
maybe
groups
the
of
bird
mammals.
messenger guild is trying to undercut the bat messengers.
Oh my god, yeah, like
and is paying their big cousin hawks to
yeah
pick them up.
Exactly. And like maybe
but equally like there's that complication of like the birds have a natural advantage because they can fly faster. And so they're going through hawk territory, which is a shortcut, but the bats can't go through it. And that's how do you deal with the fact that they can do something you can't, and that reliance and yeah,
and like so there are some interesting story beats with like a lot of these smaller creatures like fighting for survival, because like we haven't even gotten onto the whole like seasonal things yet, like things like weather, like how is that going to affect this?
Oh my god!
Like because like I was actually talking about this with my friends the other day, because I've been talking about this campaign a lot, and they were all like, one of them asked like, so what's going to happen with like winter and stuff? What's going to happen when there's like a really bad rainfall? Like how is that going to affect things? I'm like, ooh, you know what? That's going to be really interesting, and like that is probably going to affect an awful lot of things. Is like because if it's a bit rainy for like a human being, we're like, well, we just don't go outside, whatever. But like if it's really really fucking rainy and like you're a toad and you live on a river, like that's going to be a problem. Like your place is going to get flooded and a lot of you are going to get washed away.
Well, I feel there's the frogs monitor the rain, like they like the rain. It's great. Yeah. You get moist and it's wonderful. But too much rain is bad, which is actually that example that one of you gave with the beavers. I do imagine that the toads work very closely with the beavers to not for it to not come to a situation where they are flooded, and especially like riverside toads. And I do imagine that, like as you were saying this, I kind of imagine to the extent where maybe some toads like send parts of their populations or families or whatever to help with the dams, where because they're so much smaller than the beavers, they can use mud and stuff to further enforce, like make sure that there's no small leaks or anything. And they work with them in that way to ensure their own safety and also help the beavers. Like maybe they can from their slug farms and also their own toxins, they can produce something that's more stickier and better for the dam than just
the
mud.
Toad Guild of Meteorologists subcontracting to the Rat Guild of Engineers to make better dam systems for the beavers to use, and the beavers are sourcing all of the wood and materials. Okay, that's cool. I like the idea of guilds. I like the idea of like services being a binding factor for societies. So like the point of Bear Town with the bear is the service is protection and intimidation. They got a fucking bear, but it requires all of these subsystems and sub-societies to come together. Animals can survive on their own, but they like to survive together because they get these amenities and services, and that's the core element of both justice and commerce and everything. Also, throwing it out there, I think I enjoy a bartering system of like trading work and materials and food as opposed to having currency. I think currency is...
I like that.
Like
also,
they wouldn't have any reason for it.
Your comment of animals can survive alone but prefer to do it as society made me think of the societal notion of strays, of animals that choose to live in the wild alone, and how there could be such a disparity of perceiving that, as some could be like, oh, that's very like noble but harsh, and others being like, that's stupid, why would you do that? Or seeing them as creatures that are mystical, or people that are kind of mystical, or maybe just loners, or maybe societal outcasts. A stray could easily also be a label for someone who was cast out from a society.
And maybe like sort of that's part of that legal justice system, is that you get branded a stray if you violate the general like services. For example, if you're like working with the Engineers Guild and you completely don't pay for the stuff and you don't hold up your end of the bargain, they brand you a stray, and they tell every other society, oh yeah, that big that society of mice in the tree, they're strays.
Yeah,
and I mean, you don't trade with them.
Maybe it could be to the extent where the branding is almost like, because that could come into also injustice and people being out like framed and made strays, and maybe they're like branded, or like literally branded like how you used to brand cows, or how you brand people with. And because that also, like, I don't know what the access to fire is for these creatures.
I'd say if we're allowing them to have technology, and if we're allowing them to make bread, like I'd say we're looking at Iron Age to medieval levels of technology. Yeah. The idea is that everything is a smaller scale, so they can have kilns, but the kilns are like very tiny.
Tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Teeny.
But so I do imagine maybe like I mean this is very harsh, but just once again it's that thing where like it's cool in the story, it's obviously horrible in reality, but if a creature is branded made or is strayed, they are physically branded in some way, and this is a universal known sign
Ooh.
or notion among all societies that this creature is a stray, that it is unwilling to work with others, and it is ousted. But that could, but maybe once again someone was framed for this, and now they're forced to be a stray because everyone can see that they were shunned, even if they perhaps weren't actually someone who it wasn't unjust that they had been actually treated that way.
Yeah, this is a little bit sort of out there, but have you guys ever seen in America, they obviously they have a lot of bears and stuff, big and dangerous and obviously lovely, but you don't want them in towns in case they attack people, etc., etc. And like there was this system in place where they would bears that would come into towns, they would chase them away. They take them out of the town. They wouldn't kill it, but they'd take a little notch out of its ear. And if the same bear came back with a notch out of its ear, they would take a second notch out of its ear and then take it away. And if the bear came back a third time, that's when they would kill it, because it was like, this bear keeps coming back into towns. Like maybe the idea of a stray could be, and this could be a kind of more barbaric side to these little animal kingdoms. It's like maybe you are physically branded as a stray, and you get like.
I would say it starts to tread onto, because we are walking that. How to put it with words? Like this could be problematic, but it's not, because that is the story we're exploring. I say it would be a brand and it wouldn't be a cut because those things happen. It would be a tattoo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like a very permanent mark that is also very intentional.
Yes, so I'm not saying that I would expect the NPCs in this game to physically mutilate other characters in the story. Sorry, no, I more on the lines of as an example, here's like a real world example of physical branding that people have done to animals to identify them as a quote unquote recurring problem.
So this is rolling from that. It was it's the whole concept of slave marks in general. But the idea was that like slaves were marked with tattoos, and those tattoos, in the same way that brands have specific shapes and runes and things like that, indicate who the owners were. And you could cross that out and put a new brand on someone if you bought them, which is terrible. Slavery, gross. But maybe like a variation of that. Being branded a stray, like a society brands you, and that sort of like a black mark against your name, because they have that stray symbol tattooed on you. So you could have a stray symbol from a society. That doesn't exclude you from all society. It's just you are now permanently condemned by that society. There's no coming back from that.
Yeah, and there must be some when you enter a new society, there's still probably some unfortunately lingering suspicion of what did you do? What kind of person?
So like even if they have nothing wrong, even if they actually, it might also be a good thing where they go, oh, you were branded by the Society of Bat Messengers. Well, we the Bird Messengers love that. You're in. You can't be here unless you have that, unless you piss them off enough that you've done this.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated element, and again, it's that idea of like false, like you could be falsely accused, and it is a thing, and it's difficult to get rid of. Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that it's being alone is not condemned or something that is enforced. It's that tattoo and that brand and something that's actively done. So like you have lones like Lone Wolf are creatures that live alone, and they have that sort of like speculative, like, oh, why'd you do that? It's so dangerous. Or, ooh, they're really connecting with themselves. They live in isolation. How cool is that? But then strays are the ones that are branded. That's the more justice system of like, we have condemned you and we have the power to hold you down long enough to put a tattoo on you and scare you away, that you should. We all know that it's not just we don't like this person, but also we don't like them enough to do this and let them go and everything else, like all of that vibe.
Yeah, so I kind of imagine, because the justice system and this being a society that has is based on a certain era in humanity. So I imagine actually that, like, it's not like, oh, you have done wrong by the king, will chop off your head. It's just like, get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And but
Banished,
it's
basically.
not a life sentence because you can still go to the other societies.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like, we don't want you here because supposedly you did something that is uncooperative, unkind, it maybe caused horrible consequences.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want you here. But because A, animals can survive on their own anyway, and B, they can go to other societies, it's not like if a human was ousted from a society and unable to, I don't know, the nearest society is 5 days away, they'd probably die because we can't do that well out in the wilderness. But like, the animals can't survive on their own, they can go to new societies. But the biggest, because they're belonging to these places, is, I think, so important. It is the greatest punishment, is to not be part of these groups anymore.
Yeah.
Because
And you can, in theory, like, because we haven't talked about the longevity that animals have, how long they live.
yes.
But, like, in theory, you could tattoo over it and completely cover it. And then people would know, oh, you had a mark. We don't know where it's from or who it's from, but you could take it out and, in theory, return to that society. Or even, maybe there's, like, a forgive mark or something, or, like, an atonement, where you can go back and you can get it not covered up entirely, but extras added to it to show that you have balanced the scales, or you have like appropriately atoned or grown as a person, that you no longer, this mark is no longer like a shameful thing, but instead like a badge of honor, that you're like, I have reintegrated myself and I've learned. So for example, if you did something heinous and you were kicked out and actually you went on some kind of journey where you realized the wrongs that you had done, and then came back and then were able to prove it and show that, hey, look, I'm sorry and I've grown from that, then they could say, right, okay, we're going to reintegrate you and also like change. I think that's an interesting thing, and it goes both ways. Like, you could have like, oh, you saved a baby, gross, oh, you have to go away and kill a village or you can't come back, like no, and then the boss like, oh no,
put that brand on me right now.
yeah.
Because I kind of like the idea of I kind of like the idea of banishment more than, like, say, being put to death for something,
or jailed,
because like banishment is like, the world that they're living in is so harsh already. Like, there is like the idea of them dying is already, like, that is a thing that, like, legitimately just could happen in your, like, even in like the simplest of jobs, you are likely to get killed by something, because like, if you're a small creature, like, you're probably going to get eaten. Like, that is probably how you will die, unless you're lucky to live just to a ripe old age. So like, death isn't like, death kind of loses its sting almost in like a storytelling perspective.
It's a fact of life.
It's like, it's already so kind of a part of their existence already, that like the idea of banishment, of like, of forced solitude, would be infinitely more terrifying, because then, like, well, I'm much more likely to die if I'm on my own, and like that is scary.
I like the idea that there is this common shared philosophy. There isn't religion in the sense of like, oh, there's a god up there and he's looking out for me and there's a heaven. It's just, when you die, you go to the dark forest. And it's like, it's another place, and they can talk about that in different ways, like meditative, and it's just like walking around at nighttime, or they can be more abstract about it. But the idea is that ultimately we all die, we all go to the same place, and that's whatever that is. We can't ever know, which is, the human condition. So when it comes to punishment, that like, as you're saying, like banishing from society is one thing, but the only reason you would ever kill someone is if they serve such a danger that they cannot be allowed to live. And even that is a really difficult, complex problem. Like, you have these, in theory, like, to the perspective of, say, mice, objectively, or like, like mice and owls. Like, owls are objectively, they're dragons. Like, they just will kill you. And if this owl is harassing you, the first thing you do is get it to go away. It's not like, oh, let's slay the owl, because it's complicated and it results in a lot of death, and you could get the wrong owl. It could just be an owl that maybe eats one or two mice and ultimately doesn't bother you, when really there's a different owl that looks very similar that's actively trying to kill your entire village. So like, death is a complex, difficult, and somewhat taboo punishment.
Definitely. And that it just as a system is so much more interesting than just like, oh, you are a bad person, you've done a terrible thing, we will put you to death, because like that's such a final thing.
And
But like,
yeah.
this idea of like, even if it were like, okay, we have to go after this owl because it has been targeting one specific colony of like field mice or something on the outskirts of a city, and it has to be stopped because it's not going for anyone else, and like their population is being decimated. But like, even then, the first response shouldn't really be death. It should be like, we need to get rid of this owl, or we need to move these mice. Because like the owl has every right to hunt mice, but it can't. It also doesn't have the right to focus on one specific population just because it's easy or something.
And that could be
that's the thing. The moment it's focusing on one population, it is this like, it is a problem that needs to be removed.
Yes, definitely. It's like a targeted thing, and then like it's actually dangerous to the little creatures living there that are receiving end of this.
And I kind of had the thought of maybe the philosophy around death is that, or especially among the prey animals, a kind of holier than thou notion of seeing death is that death is something that predators deal, not prey, and that it is almost this beastliness to deal death.
So this links into this kind of, I wrote a note to myself, a Kinsey scale, but for sapience versus sentience. It's not like you are one or the other. It's you fall on a sliding scale, and that influences how you interact with society. So for example, like otters are big creatures in the scale of like mice and toads and stuff like that. I'd say if this is like a out of 5, they're like a 2.53. They're not hawks. They're not entirely alien, and they can still use tools, and they have those opposable thumbs, and they're cute as fuck, but they still also eat creatures. They can be omnivores, but they also can eat creatures. And so there's that level of like, you're dealing with an otter to some degree. There's always that possibility of it just like rolling you or killing your friends if you're not careful and doing that. And it's not to victim blame, but that is a relative part of where it is in life. But equally, like, if there's a mouse going around leading a warband that's destroying villages, mice don't do that as part of their natural order. I don't know. It's complicated because it gets into this place of who gets to kill, who doesn't get to kill, why do they get to kill, and that's a complex moral argument where essentially by saying, oh well, the predators get to kill, then we get to say that there are certain people in society that get to do this, and there are others who don't. Which is messy.
The omnivores, like even rats. Like I mentioned when I was looking at the predators of toads, rats are on that list. So there is a degree of now that I think about it, you are right. There's
like,
a degree of.
Do the rats have like 10%? They can get like 1 kill a day, 1 kill a year. They're like, oh, you're my kill. Fuck you.
Yeah.
I mean, this is where we can start like playing a little bit with the ideas of animal characters, obviously, because we don't need everything to be like 100% accurate to natural life. So we can sort of, I think we can fudge it a little bit and say like, yes, in the real world, rats would probably eat toads. But for storytelling purposes, maybe we don't have to have that in there, just because it might cause more problems than it would actually solve.
This is the thing about the omnivores, is that, and that's why it's a sliding scale, it's not a one or the other, is that like rats might be, okay, so if it's more like a 10 for like more numbers, rats would be a 2, because they could eat creatures, and you might get lone rats out there that purely are like carnivorous, vicious, bandit, marauder monsters. But also there are a lot of rats in society that totally live on grain and bread and fruit and barley and punch and stuff, because it's all there, and they don't have to kill, and it's so much easier just to farm.
But also, when you were saying how, for example, like, let's say these owls or hawks would be, well, they kill because they have to. There could also be a hawk or an owl where, of course, they hunt because they need to, but they're also willing to talk with and listen, and maybe if there's a society of mice that is being targeted by an owl, they can seek this owl out, and it will fight the other owl for some price, for something. And I imagine there could be bargaining chips that are things like accessories for, like, covets. corvids?
Corvids.
COVID is
Corvids.
disease. Corvids could, for example, or like magpies, corvids could be persuaded to fight other birds, other large birds, in exchange for tokens of gratitude, of accessories, or renovations for their nests, stuff like that, where they are predatory animals, but they are maybe more than often willing to.
Yeah. Like, the reason why these predators have to eat so much is to have the calories to build their own nest and do everything on their own. If the mice can come in and build the nest for them, they don't have to have those calories, so they don't have to eat less.
Yeah, I mean, but also it's, you have to eat to survive. Just bottom line, things want to live, and they have to do what they must.
Yeah, I think it comes to that dragon relationship of, like, they're not better, they're just different, and that is okay. And killing, and ultimately even them as well, to other dragons, but also, like, when they kill, it's to eat. Killing for the sake of killing is a different thing, and that's not what creatures do. And that's when that death punishment comes in. Like, if you start murdering for the sake of murdering, there's a point where you can be rehabilitated, and you can talk about why this going on and why you're feeling like this, such as like vengeance, or like this idea of justice, where those different clashing ideas are coming along. But eventually you get to a creature that is so completely blinded by bloodlust that, like, put it down, or you have to so utterly band together to get rid of it that it's like a whole forest-wide effort.
Well, there's, like, it would be an interesting kind of story thing to have in there. It's like, so obviously if an animal is coming along specifically to eat, so if like, say there is a bear, a different bear that is coming into the forest and is eating, well, any of the larger animals, maybe it's eating like a deer or something, like, that bear will come along, it will kill the deer, it will eat the deer, and then it will walk away. And, like, the same would go for foxes. Like, foxes who would eat, like, rabbits and stuff, like, they will kill the rabbit, they will eat the rabbit. But, like, so, like, death, like, and sort of burial and, like, mourning and stuff would be a really interesting thing, because obviously you wouldn't be able to have, like, a funeral or anything for the people you've lost because of just general laws of nature. Like, it's more like you have their memories.
Oh my god! But, like, that's a whole other thing. If you don't have an idea of this afterlife, of this, like, you know they're in the dark forest. That's, like, a known fact. So there's no mourning process.
Are we taking the dark forest as the afterlife from Redwall?
I think so, or maybe, like, that concept. Like, this is speculative. This isn't, like, a definitive. But, like, if you're saying they go to the dark forest, then mourning in a sense of, like, you never mourn over a body. You don't have tombs. You don't have that sort of, like, if you do have some kind of celebration, it's of acts and of history and memories, as you're saying, rather than, like, the specific elements. Yeah. Which also then, this reminds me, there was like a scene in an Animal Beast Fable game where, like, they came across, like, a hut where someone had been pecked to death by seagulls, and they had no qualms whatsoever looting it. And these weren't, like, bad people or morally grey. They're just like, oh, he's dead. Let's take the water and the food and stuff like that. Because that's what animals would do. They're also like, it's sad he got pecked to death and we couldn't get here sooner. But also, he's in the dark forest. Like, there's nothing else to debate about this.
But, like, it isn't, like, I find that as an interesting concept because, like, more often than not, or like I would say the majority of the time, you wouldn't have a body. However, like, if you had a band of renegade animals who were actually going around and murdering people, like, what a stir that would cause, because you would actually have dead bodies to deal with. Do you know what I mean?
What do with them?
Like, exactly.
Yeah,
like,
maybe eat them.
Exactly.
Oh
like,
my god.
You have a society that doesn't have, like, the idea of, like, funerals or burials. It's more just like they have passed on, we honor their memory with what we have left of them. But, like, what do you do when you actually are, like, you actually have to deal with the ideas of, like, oh my god, like, how are we supposed to celebrate their life when we have their body, which we need to
it needs to be gone.
Yeah.
So,
oh my god.
Here's my suggestion. The like, mortuary or the people who kind of deal with this are ant farmers. You put them on the anthill to strip their body, and then it's like, oh, they're not here anymore.
Or they sacrifice them to larger predators they have a working relationship with. Like, if you have one hawk for a city, like, there's enough of a slow rolling, like, death, So like Will's just commented death from old age. So I'm like, there's a rolling mortality enough to sustain one predator from a village. So like you give your dead for, accidents or like injuries or like scraps or even old age to the predator.
Oh, maybe they wander away before they die. That's a really interesting point, actually. Is like the
Ooh.
animals that are lucky enough to actually live to the point where they would die of old age. Do they do what a lot of animals do, which is go off somewhere quietly to die, or do they offer themselves up to predators?
Is it like a euthanasia where they're like,
Yeah,
I had a good life. I don't want to live until I'm old and creaky and everything hurts. It's really bad right now. Let me just, hey Hawk, take me out, fly me over the forest, and then toss me in the air and snap me up. Like, give me a good out.
Oh God, as like the hawk, as this weird ritualistic psychopomp, taking them for the last flight to the dark.
Oh my God, that's sick. And like every.
I love it though. I love it.
The notion of an old animal leaving is you say they went to the dark woods.
Well, that's what they say. Or like the euphemisms. Oh yeah, he's gone for a fly.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ooh, oh, see, this is where stuff gets really interesting.
He's gone for the flight. The flight.
He's taking the last flight, yeah.
And that's the worst thing is because they have these euphemisms, then you have like, it's like, oh, he's gone out to the farm. Oh, they took him out to the farm. Like, kids don't get it, but adults do. And adults can talk about, when I go for my flight, I want to go of this part and be really pretty and do this. And they have like this sort of acceptance of it and they can talk about it in a positive way, but also the kids are like, flying's great. Or the bats are like, but you can fly anytime you want. Like, huh? And maybe that's why, like, different metaphors for different places. So, you have, like, flights for, like, the rat city with the bears, and then you've got, like, I'm going to go for a hike with these badgers. Badger hike.
Badger hike.
I'm thinking, what would toads do?
Oh, gosh.
Because they're so cut off. They don't use the services of other...
Oh, maybe
they sail downriver.
I was going to say float downriver.
They take the final boat ride, or like they're going to the deep water or something like that.
Ooh, yeah, or just the Blackwater.
Or something else.
When characters go into the Black Forest, they go into the Dark Forest.
I mean, like
they sail to the Blackwater.
Oh, that's so cool.
They sleep in the riverbed. I mean, this is the thing: is that like. Aquatic animals that die, go into the riverbed, and then they get mulched up by fish and little bugs, and then they turn into they're the fertilizer. So maybe they just go for a nap.
I imagine it's like a whole thing where when you have an old frog or toad, they're just hobbling along, this little old toad lady, and everybody knows that she's gonna be going on her swim any day now, and it's a whole ritual thing where there's a lovely boat made out of a large leaf and you put a bunch of petals on it and a ton of stuff and it's just this big goodbye and it's their own it's not like the society's like, okay, old lady, go down,
fuck off
now. It's just
time for the death boat.
The toad decides, okay, I'm gonna go on the death boat, and it's like an entire send off and then they just float down the river, or like if the toad society is near a pond, which like I actually imagined my toad is from, it's a little closed pond, they travel to their cousins who are over the river. And it's an entire procession, and they're hobbit dwarfs essentially, so they have a big feast, a big celebration as a last hurrah, and then the toad goes on their last grand sail to the Blackwater, and because animals have that strange thing of just kind of knowing when they will die, which is why they set out and to hide away or something. This toad probably just drifts away on this boat on this water before they make it wherever they make it, and
maybe there's like traditions that are passed on and they expand out through like adjacent cultures. So like in toad society, if you're hopping along in your place and you see a leaf boat, it's tradition, you push it on. You just if it's like resting at the edge of the bank, you just push it on. And that expands out. So now that you've got these animals seeing like these leaf boats with like toads on them, and they're like, are they asleep? Oh no. Well, my friend just said you got to push it out. And there's this it becomes superstition almost, where like you understand why you do these things.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Cool. That's really cool. It kind of it's interesting having all of these like different animals because they will all deal with death in very different ways. You know, like I'm like just trying to think like how would a bat society, how would their sort of their death rituals differ from those of like a toad society or a mouse society?
Okay, so like
or,
a
I
laugh,
think
but like
the traditions are different, but the acceptance of death is all
yes.
the same.
Oh, no, yes, the acceptance of death is the same, but like the kind of the general like ritualistic moments of passing, like
so like I mean this is like a half joke, but maybe it's true. It's like bats sleep upside down in trees. Maybe you wake up and they're just not hanging there anymore.
they're just gone.
Maybe they just fell out the tree and just can't find them.
What did they actually just fall? And there's just a
In their sleep they just
graveyard?
died and whoop, gone.
So there's like a bat graveyard underneath the cave, or like at the bottom of the cave, or
And it's total sacrilege to walk on it.
oh,
Which is why, like, these bat spaces have these dedicated, like, if they fall, they die, and they're far enough away, either in the forest or in these caves, and, like, they don't eat in these caves, they go out and they find fruit and stuff, so, like, if you die in the cave, then, it's the graveyard, you can't walk on it, you only can fly in there, which is why only specific creatures can go in.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
The dying caves, if you're old, you just start sleeping in the cave. You don't buy green bananas, like...
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, ooh.
And maybe
So,
you're
like,
if you die outside of the cave, you're flown in.
So if it were the toads, sort of they're taking their final trip to the Blackwater, it's like that's the bats, like the darkness is taking them now, because you go,
So
like,
okay,
they will be able to see, but no one else will.
This is the thing. So conversations I've seen about like the motif of darkness, I feel like I want to take it away from being the black is taking them, because it puts, again, it reiterates that stigma of like black being bad and darkness being bad.
Oh yeah.
So maybe it's like it's the like.
I would never say like bad. I was just more. It's more just like.
I know, but it's a common
the
like
night.
cultural illustration. This isn't intentional. So
Yeah, no,
maybe it's
that's-
not the
that-
night,
that's fair.
but they travel to the other forest. They sail down the river. They go somewhere else. That idea of passage is what we're focusing on for that idea of death, rather
Yeah, that's
than
fair.
it's the dark forest. It's the Black
Yeah.
River. Even though Black River sounds so fucking cool and I love it, but
Yeah, that's fair.
because Blackwater is a type of river, or it's a type of biome. That is water that is basically saturated with, I think it's either from leaves or seeds, something. I'm not 100% sure, but it's this brown water, essentially. It's see-through,
yeah.
but it tints everything,
peat.
and it's kind of this
It's the
very
peat.
I don't know, it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah, but like Blackwater is one thing because that's an established thing, but like we wouldn't call it the Black Cave, we'd call it like the cave floor, or they go exploring caves or something like that. Like the analogy is about like the
They've gone spelunking.
Yep. Yeah.
That doesn't have the same kind of credence to it. I have to workshop it a little bit.
I'm looking just for one of my stories. I
Gone
have
to the
this name
stone.
for basically the other, like the, what is it called?
So like if they're bats, they go to the stone because they die on the stone.
Ooh, that's cool. I like that.
Okay, so I found this. I was looking for this one thing. In one of my stories, the notion of the afterlife or something is called elsewhere. So maybe
Ooh.
it could be something like like the other forest, or the elsewhere forest, or something like the place that is like this, but it's not here. It's the one where they go to.
The plain
And
over
the
the
world
hill.
itself, the world is, it's just the spiritual world, but it's the spiritual version of our world, and it's like, that's where they go, and into the different biomes. So, or like the different, whether it's the cave in that world, or the forest in that world, or the water in that world.
And you could have long-term standing societies where they have that exchange of, not in the sense of like prey to predator, but maybe like I'm just trying to think. Like maybe rats have a procession and take bodies out and then bury them somewhere, and equally moles leave their dead at the surface and the rats make pyres. Like, I don't know. That's a bad example, but like maybe you have two animal cultures that exchange their dead and they have that understanding of helping each other deal with them. I don't know. How would that...
I like the idea. I just still think, because like with rats burying their dead, I was just like, well, it sucks for the moles if they're just like burrowing.
Oh god, yeah.
But maybe that's the other thing I was thinking, like, sucks for the mole, but also moles go to specific places, or maybe so moles communicate
maybe
with
moles are
specific
undertakers.
farming communities and are like, hey, can I aerate your soil? And that's a specific thing of like, I'm old, I'm going to die. At some point, I'm going to die in your field, but that's cool.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And it's like it's a were guild almost. Like they get paid to do it, and that money is their inheritance to their kids.
Ooh, that's
wait. They get paid to die? Sorry, I think I might have lost
okay. So moles are an essential part of the a farming ecosystem. You have to have moles because they aerate the soil because they dig it through and they rotate it. So if it's like an established thing where like moles are old, if they're old and they know they're going to die soon, they just say, hey, can I like air quotes aerate your field? Can I dig your field? And that's them digging their own grave in the field and dying, and then you pay them because their body is going to be loads of nutrients that enrich all of the crops, and they're also aerating the soil. They're doing a job, but then the payment that you would give them is instead the inheritance to the kids.
Gotcha.
That's cool because there's an interesting kind of societal thing. It's like for the animals that do want to bury their dead, is that something that moles as particularly good diggers? Same for things like honestly for things like badgers as well, who make massive sets. Like, is that something that they would undertake as within their own little societies? Like, would they be the kind of the grave tenders for those animals that do want to bury their dead if they have their dead to bury?
I mean, I think the only thing is this, because I really like that idea previously where usually the dead's bodies aren't behind.
Yeah.
And just the new ideas are kind of branching away from that very central notion of
usually you don't have dead. Yeah, that's true.
There. So seeing the dead seeing a corpse essentially is usually the telltale sign of something. If the person's not old, obviously, of something went. But that's the thing: the animals, when they're old, they know they're gonna die. It's not like they're just gonna drop dead. So it's either I think present bodies is either there's a sickness, or there is malice afoot. There is killing.
Actually, that is a very good point. Yeah. Okay, then forget everything I just said.
No, because I'm just thinking that it's because I really, really like that notion of that you had mentioned that the bodies aren't there, and I think that's just such an interesting, such a almost pillar stone of the idea of death. Because in humans, our entire process of mourning, or within our Western civilization, especially many societies, not all of them, but most societies do have this process of mourning that involves the dead, whether it is viewing the dead, or there's entire businesses around it, right? Of morticians preparing the dead and whatnot for the last viewing, or sometimes bodies are exhumed. That's also part of the process of coming to terms with the dead after they're buried, that they're exhumed later, etc., etc. So I think it's just very interesting, the idea that these animals, the dead is not actually present there, and it is partially because this is a world where just larger things snatch you up, or that instinct that the animals have that, oh, it's going to be my time soon, and they leave. And usually because there's predators present, if they leave, go away outside of their cities or villages, they're probably going to be eaten very fast.
Probably, yeah.
Snatched up. So which
it also relates to a whole element which again is different, because animals, of the reason why we have those rituals is because of the necessity for hygiene of dealing with the dead. But animals live in a much more natural world and are around a whole other ecosystem of flora and fauna, where a human cannot deal with a rotting body being, within 10 meters of it. Like, you might have mice living near a graveyard, and it is relatively by scale so far away that it doesn't matter. Or the decomposition is so fast, or there's so little matter to decay that again it doesn't matter. Or they live in the forest, in the detritus, which is all decaying matter. It's a different aspect. So if there is a
but
war,
even then sorry.
So I was going to say, individual bodies is one thing, and they're okay with that, and so they have some of them have these rituals and they have practices, and the larger the creature gets, the more grand these things are. But again, when you have large quantities of dead unexpectedly, it is very, very sinister. So like war, famine,
Yeah.
plague, all of these things, they are signs of bad, because ultimately dead doesn't accumulate in that size ever. And it's the
Yeah.
same as if we had a plague for humans. Like if we had, to be grim, we've got COVID. Like you had hospitals having to put people in cardboard boxes and do mass graves because they couldn't deal with the amount of dead coming through.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
it's the same with animals. There would be that similar level of crisis. And it is, again, like the idea of you may see a body for an hour, but if you go back in an hour, something will have taken it, eaten it, dealt with it, whatever. Like the body is not the important thing. But if you see lots of bodies, the system can't deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because, and it's such an indicator of strife. And also, I imagine there's this fallout, because once again, in our world, things don't eat humans en masse. Things can maybe kill a human, but we're not prey animal by any, at all. If you have, let's say, a sickness that is sweeping through a little society, that will bring predators in.
That's
If
true.
you have many dead things, scavengers might come in.
Yes and no. Like, if there's a fight, you might have a deal with the predators to come and clean up while it's fresh. But the issue is, if you're having a full-out war or something, or there's a massacre, if the predators, because the predators will eat as much as they can and then leave, if they're still dead, it'll rot, it'll go fetid, and then that's when the problem starts. That's when disease starts. And this is what I'm also thinking is, again, with that element of society, you have much larger creatures that aren't predators, i.e. deer. If a deer is killed by wolves, they'll eat most of it, but then they'll leave it behind. If that gets into the river, or the pond, or the water source, suddenly the toads have a big problem on their hand. All of the water's going to stagnate and go really foul. So they need to deal with this massive deer corpse. And it's not a matter of, oh, the soul of the deer, we need to appease it. It's like there's rotting stuff. Like, something took a big poo in our pond. We got to get rid of it. Like, it's that similar level of practicality.
If not predators, actually, that's where the insect farmers can come in.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Either the ant farmers, or you could have, like... Because I just even almost imagine these ant farmers leading them like sheep to a giant
one
carcass.
big long trail, and they've got like a little... Because ants can get confused if they lose their scent trail. They've got like a little paintbrush behind them, or it's on their tail, and they're just wagging along, and they've got these ants following the smell of this like queen or something, and they're like, ba 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 ba, one long like army marching single file trail through the forest, and then, oh hey, there's a deer.
Well, see, I imagine that they're brought out because there's the deer.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you probably don't want ants straying too far, because they can probably get very destructive very fast.
Oh my god! Or equally, you get like a predator come along, and they're like, "Oh hey, this is basically a sushi belt of food for me. I'm gonna eat it." And so you have people guarding the trail, and it's a whole cool, amazing. This is cool.
Yeah, but actually, that touches on the notion of large prey animal like deer, which I just imagine, no offense to deer, but I just imagine they are, like, you can communicate with them, but they are just on a different level. It's like talking with someone who's not sober.
Oh my god, they're just vibing. You're like, oh my god, my people are
vibing,
dying, and they're like, I'm gonna bounce.
Yeah, they're just like these titanic creatures that, because like they're not good to strike any deals with, because they are prey animals. Like, they're very impressive, but the moment there's something scary, they're just like, I gotta run. But they can be very destructive, and like maybe some of them can be smart as individuals, but generally they're just these giant titans that are just vibing.
Specific words that we're using. I want to use the word behemoth for beasts that are big. So, like, deer are behemoths, or behemoths.
That's...
And then the titans are, like, humans. And that is a whole conversation we'll get onto, but, like, the elusive seen titans and the weird things they have are, like, another level of, like, myth. But
I don't know how I feel about...
Before we even go, that's a whole conversation. I want to round off. I feel like behemoths are, or, like, the prey behemoths are, and the way that we can understand this, they are inherently selfish in every respect in relation to society, because they are so big that they are unaffected by other animals, and other animals can do very little to help them or have a use with them, unless it's a relationship like, oh, there's a massive cow, or like there's a bull that plows all of our fields at once, Or like we live with the pigs and we use their fertilizer for our fields, and in return they get, we give them a portion of the food that we grow. Like outside of that specific working relationship, they don't really function. And even then, you have to also defend them from the predators. They still have that imbalanced relationship with the world. So they're big and they're selfish and they don't mind chomping through a whole toad's barrow for all their slugs and they're just walking off. And equally, no one cares about them.
Do you know? I just thought of a behemoth that would be a huge problem.
What?
Boars.
Yes, exactly.
Boars don't give a shit. Nothing, like, they are strong enough to withstand, like, maybe a bear could probably kill them, but most predators will not mess with boars because they are terribly aggressive and territorial. They will eat whatever they want. They will do whatever they want. And I just imagine, like, boar warlords are a menace.
Could you imagine?
They can come in, they can do whatever they like.
Can you imagine?
Boars from Mononoke, like they are like they're big.
I mean, larger than how they were in Mononoke.
But exactly, but like big and aggressive, and when they get like stubborn and steadfast, and like a massive fucking problem if you happen to piss them off. And I love the idea of boar warlords. That's fucking awesome.
It's they're your level 70 end game World of Warcraft content. They are rare. These events happen in like, my grandpappy once was there in the Boar Wars. But like, they are the alliances between, you have to have coordinated alliances between many different kinds of prey and predator to deal with them. So the prey are working with the predator to take them down, to poison them in a way that won't hurt the predator, to harm them or maim them so that they're easier to take down by the predator. But they also have alliances with like the bears and the hawks and the wolves, and they have shifts when they can come in and eat, depending on how much they help in the thing. And then they have the corvids coming in afterwards and eat the carrion, and then they have the ant farmers and the maggots coming in to deal with them then. And whole society having to fully function, and it's chaos. It's chaos. And ultimately, all the fallout, it's like a war profiteering. Like, you get whole people making wheeler dealers and then going away because these different sites have to break up off again. And, maybe you have, like, wartime oligarchs who are representatives of lots of different guilds. And they have this power, and then once the threat's gone, the whole power dissolves around them, and it's this whole power fantasy just crumbles. Like, we'll stay a kingdom, we can do so much more together. And all these creatures are like, it's never worked, let's not do that. Ooh, I really, really like this.
I love that, like, collectively, Ver said, Ver said boars, and we were all like, yes! And that was just that entire conversation. Like, boars!
Well, because they're such a strange, they occupy such a strange place on the food chain, where, and they're just such belligerent, weird creature. Like, I think boars are awesome, but they're also terrifying, and they can the size they can grow to as well, and they're just indestructible. And even, I mean, they're even dangerous to hunt even in nowadays, because they're I don't know, there's like this story in the little village that my family house is in, where a car, because the area is surrounded by much wilderness and there are many wild animals there, including boars. And a car once crashed into a boar in the dark. The car got totaled and the boar just kind of got up and walked on.
Oh my god.
Like, this is the level of they don't have a neck. Like, they don't care about impact. They're just here to cause problems on purpose, and that's great, and I admire them. And I imagine that in this world they are a huge problem.
Because like
the Boar Wars. Sorry, I'm looking at the
Sorry, I'm writing notes and they're getting more and more vague. I feel like I'll start a new document that'll be like the proper. We're just writing stuff down in order, and we'll all be editing it as we have ideas. But like right now, for me, the Boar Wars. That's like the beginning of the campaign. Is you guys are living in like the wake of the Boar Wars.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Of like this has happened and society is in upheaval, and maybe even we've got the collapse of like a semi-oligarchical kingdom somewhere else. But like, do you live on the fringes? Like, your societies are much more spread out. Maybe you're like in the edges of the forests or something like that, but more internal to the center of the forest, you have like the oligarchy and a crumbling empire that is struggling to maintain control, like the Roman Empire. Like, without a reason to exist, i.e. deal with the Boars, or like with the Romans, expand. They have no structure to continue existing, and they break off into lots of tiny societies. Again, which is what they were formed from.
Yeah. Also just something, this is going back to some of the more buildy block aspects of the world that we have touched on very briefly but never went into, the longevity of these creatures.
Oh god, yeah.
Because I kind of imagine, just also for the sake of translating things in a way that is understandable to us as humans, and very we have this very rigid idea of a child is this, a teenager is this, an adult is this, a middle-aged person, old person, where I imagine what would be the easiest would be for the little creatures such as the mice, frogs, rats, maybe up to weasels, where their longevity is kind of calculated like ours, and then in comparison, bears are creatures that, to us as humans, would live 800 years.
Oh, yeah, see, I was hoping that you would say that, because I was thinking exactly the same thing. Like, you know, say, I mean, we can play with the scale of things, 'cause obviously we don't want to be like, this dear old bat, she lived to the ripe old age of 4 years old. Which would be
like 4 days pass, and that's the entirety of your jail sentence.
Yeah, exactly. Like that would be kind of sad. Like we could sort of pad it out, like, you know, in terms of timing, like, you know.
Yeah, like my character is a young adult. They are 25 years old. Yeah,
exactly. So like, but like, I really love the idea of the bigger the creature, the longer they live, because like imagine like the mouse society, the mouse and rat society with the bear in the city, like that could be like the same bear that they've had for like, to them, what would feel like 400 years.
Yeah, and it's like, been generations. You know, my great grandfather served the bear as well, and I served him too.
It directly makes sense for the gestation periods and that sort of like pregnancy. I say this because I'm playing an elf in a D&D game, and I'm 400 years old, and I'm middle-aged. The whole point is I'm this middle-aged, grouchy, like minor charms enchanter, and all these other people in the party are like 20 and 30, and they're like, oh, I'm young and I'm doing my thing. And I'm like, I'm 400. I have seen literally over like 10 generations of you little snaps. Every time I've seen you guys get eaten by dragons and fuck it up, which is why I live in a city and I enchant charms. So, like, I would not. It's difficult to be a middle-aged elf and react with anything but apathy. So I like the idea of, like, if you are bigger and you live longer, that's why they have this distance of, like, it's just how it is. And they don't challenge, and they're more conservative, because literally they have seen whole cities rise and fall. And maybe they've lived through 3 or 4 Boar wars. Yeah. Oh my god, we're not doing Dragon Age, we're doing Boar Age.
Boar Age? Oh god.
Yeah. How many Boars have you lived through? I have seen 7. The chosen one. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so that totally scans.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, and just the because then I imagine, for example, otters live the equivalent of maybe 120, 150.
They're like,
where they're
elves.
Like, until in the last 20 years of those hundreds, they're old. They're elders, but for the most part, they are spry and young for much longer, and then that scales up and up and up. Like foxes live 300 years.
This is something, is that like life expectancy, which is not the same as like lifespan. Life expectancy, most people would die middle-aged. Something happens. Like, the longer you live, the more likely it is that a hawk is going to pick you up or something like that, which keeps society new and fresh. You don't have a lot of conservative old elders lying about with like hoarding power, because ultimately they get eaten.
Yeah,
which is the ultimate real life game mechanic for Eat the Rich. Literally, they were eaten. Yeah. I will say, we have been doing this for almost 3 hours for us, or 2.5 on stream.
Oh my god, that's
And
a
we're
lot.
not done. I want to keep talking.
Like
So-
there's so much stuff we haven't even talked about yet. Like we haven't even talked about like the intricacies of different societies. We haven't even talked about things like the magic system and stuff. Because
Okay,
I'm assuming there will
so
be some kind of magic system.
I know. I
don't
want to say this. Vera and I had a discussion off stream about this. I don't think we need magic. I think just the different relations of how animals work in these different spaces is magic enough. Like that's what magic is meant to do. Is that we're all humans and some of us can fly and some of us can use shields and stuff. Instead, I think like there are bats and they're just fucking bats.
Cool. That's fine.
The
'cause
bats are magic.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's totally cool then. Because
And
question
because
answered.
because the world is so grim, ultimately, like if this is a direction that we want to understand as like we're all working with this story wise, like you don't have to worry about but what if I get bored of bats? Like, don't worry, your bat will get eaten before you get bored.
Oh goodness.
Oh
I
god.
hope not.
I haven't even named her yet. And I don't want her to die.
She's already been eaten.
No.
Like ink isn't even dry on the character illustration. She's gone.
No! Don't do this to me. She's so cute.
You're
love her
just
so
the
much.
game opens with a first encounter that is you have to escape the mob like a fox.
Oh my
Okay,
god.
so like you
I'm
say
fucking-
that,
I'm
but
being-
no spoilers, please.
Hey,
don't
that's
say
not
these.
fair.
Don't say these ideas out loud because then I can't use them.
Don't kill my bat off at the first session.
I mean, that's also an alternative slide role-playing game idea that I've seen done is people starting with like 5 characters and they're all trying to escape a burning keep, and then the one that survives is the character they play in the campaign. So like,
God.
just deciding on 5 animals, no skills, no anything, just like 5 animals all trying to escape a forest fire, and then the one that does is your character, and it's the one that you want to survive. You get to choose, but like at different there's like 5 encounters, and at each encounter you have to choose which one dies, which ultimately means you're left the one that you really want.
Oh Jesus.
I mean, I feel, first of all, unfortunately, I would probably be attached to each one as I was creating them.
Oh
Same.
my god,
And
yeah.
I wouldn't really want any one of them to die. And then also, if I really wanted one to survive, the others would just be throwaways that I
Uh-huh.
wouldn't put any thought into, and
Yeah.
ultimately I still stay with the one that I really wanted.
It would be great for like a if okay, so maybe not the campaign that we do immediately because, or maybe a campaign that we ever do, but in theory, for like if you wanted to explore that as a theme, it could be really cool for like soldiers out of the Boar War surviving trauma of like 4 people
Ooh.
that they really cared about are dead, and they all have like this horrible like this happened and I can't process it, and that's like their campaign is like processing this and readjusting to societies after living in this sort of like wartime era.
Also, with this, if you're alluding that the start of the game would be kind of that escape and everything,
Mhm.
what I would probably prefer as a player is that at the very beginning of the game, I roll the dice just for 5 different animal species.
Mhm.
I don't really know anything about them, and then I just see which one survives, and then we generate the character.
Yeah. So like that's
that would be cool,
the
yeah.
not traumatic approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll take the less
Like,
trauma
hey,
path.
there's gonna be enough trauma in the actual game. I don't need it from the planning part.
Mhm.
Like
I need to
yeah,
get
from
special
what-
effects.
Even from just what we've discussed today, it's like we're kind of taking ideas from things like Redwall and stuff, but like this is gonna be a brutal fucking world that these animals are gonna live in, because like even
It's
just
also
going
going to be its own thing, because that's the
Yeah,
thing
it
is
will
that
be.
like I have played games like Mice and Mystics, and I'm excited to get not Humblewood but the Root role playing system when it arrives in the mail
Yeah.
to me, and they all have their own takes on how these different societies work together, and not many of them have a collective understanding of how prey and predators work together, because it's uncomfortable with the idea that something sentient that could be your friend is also maybe just going to eat you.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's-
yeah, I'm excited by this.
I'm really looking forward to that, just because I think it's one of those things that like in any other Beast Fable, like you have like seen and like we've talked about and stuff, but like like you're right, it is so often danced about with a lot of this kind of media. It's going to be interesting to see like how we as players, and obviously like you as the DM, how we feel about like these trade relationships, and like if people if we end up, which I imagine we will, like when streaming the game and stuff, like how people who tune in are going to feel about it. Like it's such a it's different, And I like
Yeah.
that. It's different in a way that like I didn't actually expect something that I would just kind of be hanging out with friends and doing. I was like, this is not something I don't think I've ever really seen in media before, you know.
Not to toot our own
in a
horns or
way.
anything.
Not to toot our own horn, not just to say like, aren't we so fucking fabulous? But
Yeah.
like,
There's going to be like a group out there that have hit every single point that we've done, but they've done it so much better. And they're going to have like, they're just going to come over and be like, excuse me, but we're original.
actually, yeah, no, definitely.
You're a derivative. And we'll go, oh no, that's the name of our show, Derivative.
I have to say that just all the discussion about the interplay of societies and the notion of prey and predator makes me, some part of me is like, it would be really interesting to play a predator or a creature, omnivore.
Mm-hmm.
But I am also too attached to my toad boy.
I feel like this is a good introduction.
Now.
Like we start with like your toad and your bat, and that's the point where we enter the world from, because we have to explore it as we go. And then maybe if we get a third player in the game, someone joins, I don't know, like they play a predator, and that's part of the dynamic. Or like a guest character could be the predator for like 2 or 3 sessions.
Yeah.
And you're in a working relationship and then they leave, and we can still explore that. Or equally, if your characters die, then in comes Snakey. You could be the snake that eats your toad. Oh my god.
No.
Well, see...
The system is called Food Chain. You play the thing that eats you.
The snake would grab the toad in its mouth and spit it back out. That's the distinct. Yeah. My character can't fly, but he's inedible. That's his perk as a creature.
Or could you like imagine going from like being like, it doesn't necessarily eat you, but it's sort of like the wolf that chews you up, and so like Mr. Toad is dead, and then you switch to the wolf, being like, oh god, that was vile. Ugh.
Yeah.
Needed way more salt.
Okay, getting to play a wolf would be such a power trip, though. Just like, hey, bat, what are your problems? I'll deal with any of them. I can literally just destroy the careers and lives of anyone you point me at.
Literally, yeah. But like, that would be an incredibly weird relationship. That would be such a weird relationship. Like if say for example that Vere's wonderful little toad gets eaten, I'd really hope that they don't, because I love him so much. Oh god, no! It's even too sad to think about. But like so like you know, then you have to take on the properties of the animal that has eaten you, and maybe it was a wolf, and like I just have this huge fucking behemoth following me around, like, I will do your bidding, tiny creature, and then the bat's like, okay.
Or maybe it's not even like that.
Friend.
It's like, look, I have a good relationship with the Bat Guild. Let me do you a favor, and then I'll go my own way. And so you're just a bat with a wolf following you about, and everyone's like, oh my god, what? And you're like, look, he owes the guild a favor, and he ain't my friend.
I'm not sure what to do with this. I'm just here, and I'm small, and I can't get rid of this wolf.
Oh.
I mean, I feel like in terms of system setting, because that would be the equivalent of just a player character getting to be a dragon.
Yeah, basically.
I feel there would need to be a cap, because like,
because this is the thing, is that like it changes the whole dynamic because of their size. They can't get into cities. Everyone flees immediately when they see them. They're the target of other predators. Like, it is a whole other ballpark game, and it's interesting and cool.
That is true, but I think just as a player, because I love the idea of these societies and everything, I'd probably be like, can I just roll a new character that can actually interact with these societies?
Yeah.
That's kind of the funnest part.
I'm not saying we have to do it. I'm just saying, like
it'd be very funny.
Like, throw out joke.
That
was it.
No, like, see, but that's the thing, that there's so many fun ideas that I'm definitely, there's a part of me that instantly starts considering, how do I feel about this? How would that work? Which is why, in this particular instance, I'm just like, I don't think that would work, even though it was just a fun thing. But my brain's just that little hamster is running in that wheel so fast right now that everything is being put on the table as a proposition that I am fully considering.
But I will say, we have to wrap up. And I think, again, next week, Wednesday.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So I think we will... Okay, so our goal for us 3 is to make a document of just like of established rules, not rules, but like general understandings of how the world works. So putting more of this to a more general understanding of like, so this is how we feel, like heading, death, writing in, oh yeah, we do this and this and this and this, and here's a specific example that we thought of. But we don't have to have like moles do this and badgers do this. We can add to a growing like world truths document as we go. But ultimately, like we cover the bases
during the game. As well, but
awesome.
And I imagine there will be many bases that do pop up just during the game where it's like, oh wait, so what kind of weapons do we use? Because whatever, because of these reasons.
And then we can we can add that to the base document, and then we can have a separate document which is like specific examples. Yeah, cool, amazing, sexy, fab, cool. This is going to be a really freaking great game.
I'm really excited.
I'm very excited.
Excited.
I mean, I feel like we have barely even we've talked about so much, and I still feel like there is so much more that we could discuss, like getting into the intricacies of like the politics and the societies of each of the main animals that we might be focusing on, like the idea of these like behemoths and then like denizens in the water and big scary birds and stuff. Like I just all of that, there's so much we can still talk about, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, though there is also that degree, there's a degree of world building whenever you're preparing for a story or a project, where it's very easy to get almost not a decision paralysis, but an equivalent of that in creativity, where it's like, oh, I gotta go over this and I gotta go over that, and oh my god, that spurs this, where you do that too much and never actually start the thing.
That's true.
So there will have to be a line where we're just like, okay, we got enough of that, we have to start the game. If something comes up, we're gonna just figure it out. With our shared idea of how everything works. But it's just such an easy trap to fall into with preparation for a world that
this is
we also have to cap it.
Like, it's
clearly.
a system that I have seen in specifically Ironsworn, which is a single or multiplayer role-playing game. So I'm mentioning it, but it's not like it exclusively is there. But it is like the known truths document, where basically you establish like the 10 known truths that they suggest of like, consider these 10 things, write down the truths, and then each time you come across something that expands that, you add to the document, but you start play after you've established those 10 things. So we do everything that we talked about establishing here, because I feel like we've got a good base. And then next session, maybe we're focusing more on the specific cultures between these two characters. Atlanta, your homework is to get a name.
Okay, yes, I will name her. I'm sorry.
We make characters with the Adventures on a Dime system, and explore what that will look like, how that works, and all that jazz. With the goal of in 2 weeks doing our first game.
Hell yes!
Yes, please.
This was meant to be an hour-long stream. It's turned into 2.5 hours.
Whoops.
It was fun, but we have to do something very important off-stream. We have to finish our Red Knight game.
Yes.
Oh my god, yes we do.
So get ready for... Oh my god, we weren't ready last week, so we had to take a temporary pause. But yeah, get ready for like emotions, guys. I've got music. I've got events. I've got tables. I've wrote some stuff down. It's going to be intense. I don't know how it's going to end. We'll see.
Ooh, exciting.
That's scary.
Yeah. But
exciting.
Yeah, feel like catharsis is the word.
Oh god. Yeah. I'm still scared.
But yeah, so following feedback, apparently our streams cut off 15 seconds before we stop speaking, because that's when I hit end stream, but not when the streaming is updated. So what we're going to do is, this is the end of the stream. I'm Brian, and then Vera and Atlanta are going to introduce themselves again. Please like the video and subscribe if you're not. I feel like I'm a proper streamer for having said that now, but it's very important because we like people watching our stuff, and it's really fun to do. But yeah, after we do all that jazz, then we'll say the stream has ended, and then we'll like dance around for 15 seconds, and then I'll end the stream, and then I can click it afterwards if there's any left over.
All right,
so anyway,
well, let's do it then.
So I'm Brian Tyrrell. I run Dungeons on a Dime. I write adventures. I am working on some really cool projects which I'll be able to talk about soon. But I also have In the Red, which is coming out. I just got, actually today, proofs of the Dungeon Master screen, which I have been trying to get printed forever, but it's actually like a thing now. You can find me at Dungeons on a Dime on all social media, but also on Twitter. I'm most active on Instagram, but I'm getting pretty good at Twitter as well. I'm getting the hang of it. Yeah, and it has been my joy to be joined today first by Ver.
Yes, you can find me on primarily Twitter, Verface at Twitter. I also sometimes upload the same art to Tumblr. Still, yeah, I'm still on Tumblr, which is Sticks and Sharks, a very old handle. I don't really do Instagram or any other social media of note, so you can follow me there. And I suppose that's about it for my portion here. I'm very happy to have joined Atlanta and Brian on this lovely stream, and I hope to come to the ones that will be happening in the future as well.
Yes. And
Yay.
last but not least, Atlanta.
It's me again because I apparently just now live on Brian's streams on Wednesdays.
Because
you
you're
can
fun
find
to
me-
hang out with, and I love it.
Oh, thank you. Like you can find me at Alpaca Scribbles on Twitter, Alpaca_Scribbles on Instagram. I'm not particularly active on either at the moment because I am taking a kind of pretty extended break from social media due to mental health reasons. But I'm still quite active on like my Patreon, again at Alpaca Scribbles. You can find me there. And I do lots of drawings. There will be a lot of stuff from this campaign and also everything that I've drawn from the campaign that we are still kind of playing is also up on there. And yeah, Brian, again, thank you very much for having me again for another week of streaming. It's been really fun to have you two as well there because it's nice to be able to bounce ideas off all of us.
Oh, it's been so fun.
This is
so fun.
Incredible.
It's been such a laugh.
I'm really excited for next week, and I kind of want it to be
Me
Wednesday
too.
already. I'm like, oh, do you guys want to do this tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after, and the day after, and the day after? Yeah. So
I
yeah.
would.
I
Oh,
would
and
if I
final
could,
shout out
honestly.
for me because I'm selfish. I'm going to be doing a July offer for my Patreon where anyone who subs in July or is already subbed gets a pin badge. So sign up and
Oh my
give me your
God.
money.
Go and support Brian.
I did the designs and I was looking at them today, and I'm going to be honest, I feel pretty slick.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yes. So that has been the stream. We will see you next week, and hope you have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay, now 15 seconds of just like dancing and vibing.
Cool.
Yeah,
Vibe time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm just doing very slow motion voguing.
Oh yeah.
Hell yeah.
I was going to say vaguing for there.
Voguing.
Verging. Verging.
It is vaguing. It's vague voguing. So.
Fake voguing.
Mm-hmm.
Fake voguing with there.
Mm-hmm. That's on Fridays, 12 till 5.
I'm into it. I will tune in.
Okay, I'm hitting the button. End stream.
Go for it.
It's probably gonna cut off at us starting to say, let's dance.
Okay, so the thing is I can